Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome. This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. If there's anyone present who's going to record or planning to record later in the meeting, would you please indicate at this time? I don't see anyone. Thank you. All right. First item on the agenda is two consent agendas approval. I'll entertain motions.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting July 19, 2016.
Second.
I can't. I wasn't here.
Oh, second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
One abstention. Okay. For the public session on August 2nd, please.
I make a motion to approve the approval of the minutes of the public session on full-day kindergarten on August 2nd, 2016.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any negative votes or abstentions? Seeing none, unanimous. Okay, we're now going into the time for public comments. I would just ask that when you come up, if you would identify yourself and give your address for the record. Anyone like to speak to us at this time? Okay, takes care of that. Check boxes. Now we're in good news.
Good news. Thank you, Chair Thomas. I've actually invited 3 of our new staff members that have come on board over the course of this summer to the meeting tonight, just to be introduced and to be able to share them with you. If you wouldn't mind, we could actually call them all up at the same time. The first individual is Dr. Cheryl Kirkpatrick. Cheryl is coming on board as our new Director of Personnel and Professional Learning. Oh, come on up to the table.
Come on down.
Second, we have Bill Silver, who is coming on board this summer as our Director of Information, Communication, and Technology Services, our new Technology Director. And then, so those two individuals, you're welcome to sit down. Ooh, have a seat. Okay. Oh, we don't have to wait for Brian. And then our third individual, Brian has actually been on the longest. He came on in April. Brian Curley is our Director of Facility Services, and Brian's been working hard this spring with the transition of the different custodial contracted services vendors and hiring new staff to the district. And then this summer, being in the schools, as a lot of the work is really transforming the schools to get them up to par for September. So I'm very delighted that Cheryl, Brian, and Bill are joining us for the school year. All are on board full-time at this point. Wanted an opportunity just to introduce them to you and invite them to just say a word or two if they'd like to about coming on board, and certainly answer any questions you may have about their onboarding. Cheryl, would you want to say a word?
First of all, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much. And I've been here now 17 days. And it's been not dull. And we're doing a great job bringing people in, getting people hired, ready for the start of the school year. It's been really busy and really exciting. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Mr. Curley, could you tell us how excited you are about being with us this summer?
Dr. Lang, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I think this has been a unique opportunity to take on this challenge of getting things back to where they need to be, but also a good chance to build things from the ground up. You know, we've hired some new town custodians, and it was a great process, and I think we have some candidates that are going to really bring us to the next phase. They have a sense of ownership about the buildings, and they're already taking a lot of pride in what they're doing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Silver. I'm very excited to be here. It's a big departure from what I was doing. I had just a massive district that I was working in, and this is much smaller and much more tight-knit, it seems. And I've just been really enjoying meeting the people, getting out there, kind of seeing what we have for technology in the district and starting to wrap my head around what's there and where we can go.
Who turned out the lights?
Say it again.
When you left Lowell.
Oh, jeez. You had to say that.
So,
Brian, I just want to tell you how excited, and certainly Cheryl and Bill, I don't want to take light off of what you guys do for our system, but Brian, I just want to tell you that we talk to so many parents on a daily basis, and they're just so concerned with not only the inside, which you're tackling and doing a great job, but also the exterior of the building. So, you know, as this continues to evolve, you know, that's a big deal with the parents. You know, they pull up and the weeds or the place doesn't look kept or whatever the situation is. It's just something that we're constantly battling because fortunately or unfortunately, every tax dollar that the taxpayer pays thinks goes right to the school, and why shouldn't the schools look 100% all the time? So everybody has a tough job, but with that, if you could just keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and congratulations to all three of you.
Thank you.
again, welcome to the district on behalf of the whole board. And hope you stay a long time and keep things rolling on a positive note.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'm very glad that they're on board, and I'm looking for a good start to the school year on all fronts. I'm very excited about the individuals. What I would ask for your indulgence in, if you'd like, there are two agenda items that were scheduled for later in the evening. One related to permission to post a call-in building attendant that pertained to Brian's work in the district, and then a second one was a permission to post around a technology position that we wanted to be revamped. Would the committee indulge me in taking those two items out of order, just in case there are questions for Brian or Bill, so that we could address that this evening and be able to send them on their way? They have more work to do, and I want to get them out there doing it if we can. Would that be okay?
Do you need a motion?
Concerns? You want a motion?
Totally up to you. I don't know how you.
Yeah, why
usually
don't we
it.
do it, just to keep it clean?
I make a motion to take the posting of the call-in event attendant and the posting of the ICTS manager out of order and bring it up to this point right now to discuss.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion at this point? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any negative vote or abstention? None, so it's unanimous.
So the first item is actually item number 6 on the agenda, permission to post a call-in building attendant. As you recall, over the course of the spring, we hired the daytime custodians to work in the buildings directly for us at the school department. Our contracted cleaning service providers are coming in the evening to provide the contracted cleaning. But there will be times when we have individual organizations in the community, profit, nonprofit, that rent our schools in the evenings or on the weekends, where we need to have some district presence. We're going to try to fill some of those vacancies with our custodians in an overtime type situation. But because we only have 10 and you can have multiple buildings being used at the same time, we also don't want to dilute the pool too much so that you don't have coverage. So we're proposing adding this temporary call-in building attendant position to basically develop a pool of maybe a half a dozen people or so, most likely, retired workers who would be available on call basis to be able to come in and cover a shift. So there might be something going on at the high school at the PAC that night. We didn't have any nighttime coverage, or the McCarthy Auditorium or a gym or whatnot. We would call one of these individuals in, and basically the fee or the ability to pay them is going to be coming from the fee that we would assess the group coming in at night to rent the school. So a group coming in to rent a gymnasium would pay a fee. That fee would then be used through the revolving fund to reimburse this call-in attendant. So it's really a net neutral cost to the local operating budget. We need a body to be able to staff the event to make sure that the building is secure and it's left in the same condition when the using group leaves as it was when they arrived. So that's the intent of this position. Again, I think probably 4 to 6 people that would be on call and just available for cover when our custodians can't. So bringing that forward as a recommendation to pretty much kind of fulfill our whole staffing model for this coming year. That's the one piece that was outstanding. So we did attach a job description. I see it being a rolling kind of description. We're always going to want to keep, almost like a substitute, you're going to want to keep 4 or 6 people available in the event of coverage needs. So it'll be an ongoing posting, like we would advertise for substitute teachers or something along those lines. And Brian will oversee the training of them and scheduling and whatnot. So I bring that forward as a request and seek your approval. Certainly happy to answer any questions, or Brian could as well.
Any questions?
No.
Benefits? Are they getting any benefits?
No, it's just excuse me, it's just a strict hourly position. There wouldn't be any benefits because they won't be working on average more than 19 hours a week.
Got it.
And the person who's renting the facility pays for their,
Pays for the hourly fee, yeah. I mean, there's lag time because you have to obviously pay the person. Sometimes you won't have the fee in, but it's all going to go through the revolving fund. So, yeah, the fee for the use of the school is going to pay for this position.
Yeah, we talked about this some
We
time
talked
ago.
about it, we
This-
just never
this is-
formalized
right.
the posting.
All set?
All said, I make a motion to approve the call-in attendant for the events.
second?
Any questions, discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any negative vote or abstention? Seeing none, unanimous.
Thank you. And then the next item on the agenda, which followed that, was the permission to post an ICT service manager. And again, Bill Silver, our new director of ICT, can speak to this. But as he's come on board over the course of the summer and started meeting with staff and assessing the various positions that are within the department and some vacancies within the department, he would like to revamp one of the existing positions, and I can certainly let him talk to it more. It's not a new position, it's a position that's unfilled at this point in the budget. The funding is there for the position. He would like to just shift the need from, kind of providing data support, because we have other individuals in the department that do that, to a more technology user kind of enabling position. But Bill, I don't know if you'd like to talk to that for a minute.
Yeah, I'm right now, the position is called the district-wide data officer. And I have two other positions that have some overlap as far as data goes. And I have specifically one position who's vocalized the desire to do more within the department, and I'm all about giving people that opportunity. I think it's great when someone wants to do that. So I'd really like to, have her take on some of these other responsibilities, and then focus this position into something that will really be the main point of contact for all of our, I call it customers or end users that call into the department. This person will field all the calls, they'll manage the help desk system, they'll make sure that all the tickets are being given to the appropriate technicians that have the skill set to deal with the tickets that come in. And all in all, just sort of really be the main point of contact and bring everything together for us. So it will take a lot of technical skill, and it's something that we don't have a lot of technicians right now out in the district. Unfortunately, there's really just one computer technician out there right now. So this would be a nice thing to bring on board as we try to fill a vacant computer technician position and have this in place. So when folks come back to school, we really have something nice to show them, and a good customer service oriented type of position in the department.
Why don't we do a motion?
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the new ICTS manager position as specified by Bill Silva.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion to,
Discussion.
I'm sorry, yeah, I wasn't gonna,
Yeah.
Oh.
that's what I was gonna do. Go ahead.
One thing that was pretty efficient was our tech calls. I mean, people, I've never heard a complaint in the system about it. I understand why it would be, maybe more efficient to have someone, but is that a full-time job?
Yeah, it's really not just going to be managing just the ticket system. There are a number of other pieces, and you do have the job description. I can go through some of those components with you, but they will still take on some responsibility for, entering students and teachers into various learning programs. They will help occasionally update the website. There's a number of pieces melded into this one, but I want someone to be the main face of the department that people know when we've already set up the help number. You dial help on the phone and it will ring right to this person's, who takes this position's phone. And I want people to understand that they can come to us with anything. I get a bit of an impression right now that maybe we're not having as many tickets entered as we probably should. And I think that the ones that are entered probably are being dealt with rather efficiently, but I think that there are a lot more out there that probably could be entered that maybe folks just haven't been doing because for any number of reasons. But that's what I hope to increase. Having more tickets isn't necessarily a bad thing. It really lets you know exactly where you stand and what needs improvement and what you're doing well.
For the people at home, could you just explain the ticket system, because they may not know what we're talking about?
Sure, yeah. Right now, the way our ticket system works is a teacher will send an email to help desk at Chelmsford, and that will auto-generate a ticket, and they will populate the email with their request. And what we're actually working on right now is a way to have people enter a ticket via category, so we actually can see what we're servicing and when. Right now, we just sort of have a large pool of tickets that are assigned to a technician, but we don't necessarily have a handle on, we're always having trouble with printers, or we're always having trouble with Wi-Fi, or we're always having trouble with this, that, or the other thing. And it's really important to get a handle on what the real needs are in the district.
Did you have something?
Are you talking hardware and software? So
Yeah,
repairs of hardware?
Yes, the ticket system I want to contain everything. It'll be network, computer hardware, software, and if people want to interact with integration specialists, they have an opportunity to request them, so that they can schedule their days when they're not teaching to be with teachers and enhance their skill set.
Do we have service agreements for hardware repair, though?
Service agreements for hardware repair?
Yeah.
Warranty.
In some cases, there are some service agreements in place. Here's another issue that we have. As far as warranty goes, it would be very difficult to tell you everything that's under warranty right now. We don't necessarily have a full inventory of all the equipment that's out there. So that's something that is going to be a main point of focus as we begin the year, to have people out asset tagging our devices and building an actual inventory to find out where we stand with that.
Is this particularly time critical or sensitive?
I feel like if we could have it in place before teachers come back, it would be ideal. I think that this would be a nice thing for folks to come back to, and we can guarantee them that any needs that they have in the beginning of the year can be met easily. Just with the one technician I have right now, and she does a fantastic job, but there are so many computers just to hook back up from after buffing the floors and putting things back that she's nervous about being able to finish it. And I've assured her that she has nothing to be nervous about, but at the same time, there are only so many folks in the department. So I think that this is a critical position for the beginning of the year.
So my concern is that first of all, I didn't, reading the memo, I didn't take away from that there was only one technician on the job now. It sounds like you're repurposing one role into another, and I think that's appropriate. But it sounds like, or it feels like, this is one piece of kind of a larger puzzle, and I think I'd like to see an overview of the puzzle first, just to help understand what's happening here. Some of these positions that we're posting are either things which are not changing, things that have been telegraphed in advance, kind of small changes to our operations. I'm getting that this is a change in the way that we're doing business in the IT department, and it's hard to kind of understand how this one piece of it goes together with the rest of the IT department. In the past, we've had an August report on kind of the state of the IT department. Clearly, that hasn't been possible this year. But would it be impossible to have a presentation for the first meeting in September that kind of gives us that overview of, admittedly, it doesn't give you an awful lot of time, but maybe it would be enough to summarize your initial impressions and kind of lay out a roadmap for where you see us now, where you'd like to see us at the end of the year, almost like an entry plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have every intention of providing a plan to you from my observations. Obviously, I don't have all
Sure.
the details right now. I haven't even seen the inner workings work under the stress load of a full set of teachers and students in the building. I do have some preliminary ideas of things that I know need to be addressed. And this is a component and of what I, will propose to you as a full plan. But delaying it, I think you'll see when I lay out what I'd like to do over the course of the next several years. This would always be a central component of it. I'm never going to come to you and say we should cut, 3 or 4 positions out of technology or anything like that. If anything, technology will grow over the next several years, especially as we head into online testing and things like that. We do need to have a face of the department. We need to have a person who's immediately available to try to triage situations as they arise. Even if we had a great response time now of, say, 12 to 24 hours on something, if you have a kid taking a test and something happens, 24 hours is too late to deal with that problem. And this type of role is something that I would recommend because I've seen it work really well. And I know it's an important position.
And it's my understanding, Dr. Lang, that we're not increasing the budget, correct? We're not changing
No,
it.
this is basically repurposing an existing position. So there's an existing data coordinator position that's vacant. It's repurposing, retooling that position because Bill's identifying a different priority area and utilizing that funding to support this other role.
If anything, this person there'll be a little bit of redundancy in there too, This person can also multitask. It's not just relegated to that. He'll be doing, or she'll be doing other things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd like them to be able to play a backup role to several of our roles that exist already. If someone needs to take a vacation or they have an emergency, we need another go-to person, So this will be able to fulfill that kind of role as well.
Michael, I wasn't clear where you left off. Did you want to hold this position and then get the big picture, or just get the big picture if we put it through tonight?
Well, I'm trying to
asking.
understand just how critical it is to fill this position, to do it now instead of doing it 2 weeks from now. I understand that that's the difference between having somebody in place for the first day of school and the second or third week of school. But I really would like to have some kind of an overview here. I agree with everything that you said about the utility of a person like this, about the role that they can play.
Do we have the ability, if we were to, just throwing some ideas out there, let's say we were to approve this and an overview comes in, do we have the ability to say, okay, we've approved this position, we've gone through the overview, we have some questions, could you revisit this job title, this job description, assuming that the board as a consensus didn't feel comfortable after the overview? You could still probably do that, right, Bill?
I don't see why someone who would come into the role that they, it's pretty clear by the job description, is very broad, would have any trouble with some redirection on what their role was. I think that would probably be appropriate.
So maybe, Michael, what we could do, and just a suggestion, Mr. Chairman, maybe we could approve this because school's right around the corner, and you did describe a sense of urgency for the beginning of the school year. Maybe Bill could put together a overview. The entire committee could look at it, and if there's any concern, we could revisit that. But if there wasn't a concern, well, then you didn't stop, and we didn't step outside our boundary and hire someone that we're going to cut loose anyways. Would that be potentially something that we could consider as a board? Just a thought.
I can certainly consider that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what committee member Michael Rigney has to say is important. I think we should put a review together, or an overview of the department. In the meantime, maybe we could approve this, and if we have any concern at all, revisit after this overview is taken, and hopefully Bill will take our suggestions, or at least make some recommendations to the superintendent.
Yeah, I mean, and I know John may want to weigh in too, but, when Bill came with this idea, I obviously want to support him as he's new to this role and trying to really make the best impression he can for the start of the school year and kind of a renewed focus and energy around the technology group. I'm happy in some sense that, whoever came into the role didn't just say, well, I have this X position and I'm just going to post it and fill it and, just go through the motions, that he was really thoughtful in saying, I don't need X position, I could really need something else. And I guess I take some comfort in knowing also that in whatever iteration of a plan, whether it comes now or in 2 weeks or in two years, Bill's indicating that this position would be part of that plan, that there's a need around that kind of that triage role, that expert type role within the department, that he, it's just not there today and it's not going to be there in 2 weeks, but it would be part of the overarching plan anyway. And I think I personally have seen too many times people actually see a role and take the path of least resistance, which is, the funding there, the role is there, I'm just going to hire for that role, but then really have the person do something else. And I don't think that's helpful, to the organization or to anyone. I mean, I'd much rather have department heads come forward and say, here's a need, I'm identifying it, this is really my intention with the position, and be more transparent, because that's what we are trying to do within, our kind of work going forward. So on those levels, I was satisfied that, whether it's now or in a couple of weeks, this position would be part of that, that kind of plan. I absolutely think that plan needs to come forward. And I think, there'll be an interim kind of entry plan that's going to come forward, in September. And then it is going to take Bill and the whole technology group some time to see, kids coming into buildings and staff returning, just to get some level of exactly what the demand is or what the issues are for that longer term planning that's going to happen. I do see an entry plan, say, in September, but I think we're going to have to revisit that in, December, January, when we start talking about budget implications and capital budgets, around technology. But I guess I was comfortable knowing that, this type of a position would be included under any scenario. And waiting just a couple of weeks, basically, would only delay when this person could actually come into the district and start working, thinking that, if it got approved, you still have a 2 to 3 week posting cycle and you've got to get someone on board. So trying to get someone on board, in early September as opposed to October, November, what was going through our minds at this point. But that was my my take on it.
So first, welcome to Chelmsford. It's a good town. So there's a couple things. So first of all, in terms of the position, if I were going to have it approved, I would do it strictly on the fact that I'd want to have somebody come in before students came. I think where you're going to get some general pushback from the IT department, and I heard I'm sure you've heard, you've walked into an interesting situation, is that we actually really don't know what we have, and it's not like we haven't asked for it. And I'm new here too, by the way. I've only been here for a few months. But some of the prior members, people that have been here a while, don't really understand what we have for inventory, what we have for connectivity, what we have in terms of warranties, what we have for service, who our contracts are with, and these are really important things for us to know. And I think that's kind of what Mike is alluding to. So I have talked to Dr. Lang about this, and we are going to be asking for a lot of information on what's out there. When does this stuff go into life? When does it go into support? What are you thinking about replacing? I mean, do we have, I think Dr. Lang mentioned we have XP on some computers, one or two. Yeah. So those are things we're going to want to see. And I actually have an email all typed up, so I'll send out an actual email so you can see it. But I guess where I'm going to leave that is, I support the position because I'd want to get them in here before there's 5,000 students running around. Just with the consideration that when you come back, we are going to want the information, and I think we're all expecting a little bit more transparency from the IT department than they've probably gotten in the prior years. So,
Yeah, I agree with you, John.
that's it. That's all I get.
I mean, and I look forward to that. Please share the email with me. I want to provide as much information as I can gather for the first review, and all the information I can give you that you need.
And just one other point too is I'm also going to be applying for the IT Capital Committee. Is that
Subcommittee.
right? Subcommittee, because the school department runs pretty much the entire IT infrastructure for the town and the school.
Right.
So you'll at least have a voice from the school committee there.
And he's on it.
He's on it.
Who?
Bill.
Oh, you're going to be on it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
He
well.
chairs it.
I would hope he was on it.
Not, John Souza is the chair.
It'll be good to have a partner.
Forget it. I was trying to.
John is.
I agree with John Moses.
Yeah, thanks. By the way, we'll work together a lot then.
But I do appreciate that, you know, you looked at the staffing and said, I see what this position, that's an empty position is, you know, but I don't need that. You know, I've got redundancy here. And, you know, you do have a person here who has not been really able to do that job. And now they would be able to do that job, and then we can use that slot. I just, you know, as far as I have ever, I mean, that's one thing is our help desk has always been really solid. So, I mean, seriously, you could pick up the phone and before you hung up, they'd be there, you know? So I don't want it, I don't want it to be too reliant on, we don't really need to shake that up too much. Would this person be like after hours also? Like parents sometimes can't get onto X2, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, technicians, by and large, they don't disconnect from anything.
Yeah.
So if they're getting emails or calls or something like that, many times they just handle it, even if it is after hours. I mean, the present employees you're very familiar with, our network manager, I mean, I've emailed him at 11 o'clock at night and he responds, you know, it's, that's just the role that they play.
I just had one concern when the discussion was going. We'll take a look at it and maybe change the name and change the. If I were a candidate, I wouldn't want to be applying for a job that was kind of in process.
Right.
I think what we, in my opinion, I'd rather just make it clean cut, get them in, do the work, come back, get the plan, and then if we need to make changes, you know, after a year or whatever, when we see how it all functions, that's fine with me. But I would hate to be a candidate coming in with a job in flux and wondering, you know, what am I really gonna end up with?
No, I agree with you there, but I also want to see the plan. I really.
wanna see the
yeah.
plan.
So, you know, if we see the plan and we say, yeah, maybe not so much, you know? I want to see the plan. I don't mean to be disrespectful. Let's just say we all have a reason to want to see a plan.
Right.
But you're not going against the idea of allowing Bill to fill this position right now?
No.
So
No.
I
can
think we're on the same page at
Okay.
this point.
So should I make a motion?
Yes, please.
We're already in motion, I thought.
Right, I thought we already approved.
We made a
yes,
motion, we
we've
seconded,
got a
we had
motion, we're in
discussion, now we have to call for the vote.
So let's call for a vote with the understanding of a plan is coming, and we're gonna give Bill the appropriate time to put a thoughtful plan forward, and at that point, we'll revisit it and we'll voice our concerns if there's an issue, but other than that, we should move forward on the ICTS manager position as Bill stated.
Okay. Is everybody comfortable with the
Yes.
direction
Yeah.
that we're going in?
Yep.
Okay. All in favor of the creation of this position, say aye.
Aye.
Any negative votes or abstentions? None. Unanimous.
Thank you very much, congratulations.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for coming
Welcome
tonight.
to Chelmsford, Bill.
We needed to have that discussion.
Brian had this conversation a while back.
Okay. Move on.
Yes.
What are we up to?
Okay, at this point, if we could invite, I just need a second to get the presentation going, but if we could invite the Dora Whittier partners to come on up, and we'll do the continued discussion on comprehensive folder K. I know, too, we have a working group that's been working to, on this whole project. Also in attendance tonight, you know, Brian Curley, Pat Maloney, and Gary Persichetti are part of that working group. If the committee wouldn't mind, because it really is kind of a discussion with them, could we invite them also to come up and sit with us, just to be able to share in the dialogue and in case questions do come? If no one objects.
Any concern?
No, no,
Okay.
I just need a second to get the thing going.
Yeah.
You don't even know where you're pointing.
I felt like this, we thought it was behind me, don't ask me why.
No, there were
Okay.
some minor things. You have bigger TVs than I do at home.
No, mine's not. Salad.
So the only thing we didn't figure out, I'm gonna have to click the things for you, so you just give me a wink and I'll,
You need a low-tech clock on that wall.
Can we call Bill back?
Thank you, Ann.
Well, perhaps it's appropriate I'm sitting in this particular chair.
The hot seat.
It's always a pleasure to be back in front of the school committee. Since we saw you last time, about a month ago, we've been continuing to look at the full-day kindergarten scenarios. And what's on the screen now is a short agenda for our segment this evening. We want to remind you about the previous full-day kindergarten scenarios we've presented in the past. We actually have an additional full-day kindergarten scenario to present this morning, or excuse me, this evening. We hope to have a discussion around that, and ultimately, we're hoping for some direction for the design team coming out of the school committee meeting tonight. And part of what prompted this evening's presentation was a request that we make sure we've covered all of our bases, right? That we've looked at all of the possibilities for the full-day kindergarten scenario. And the new option we're going to look at this evening was generated from the question, is there a scenario where if we consider changes to how we run schedules or use spaces, that we can accommodate full-day kindergarten without adding any additional modulars to the district? So that's what we want to present with you this evening. So just to remind you what the previous options were, and we won't spend a lot of time on these. There were 4 previously. Several of them revolved around placing modulars in various places around the district. Option C was to look at potential rental space in the district, and we do have some updated cost estimate information related to that this evening. But option E is the new information tonight. Speculating about what if we were able to change the schedule and change the grade configuration in the district. Again, could we accommodate full-day kindergarten without adding modulars to the district? So here's option C, the updated information. As you may be aware, some of our working group members scouted around town to see what was actually available, and what was discovered was that a more realistic number for rent was $7.50 a square foot for the size facility that is being explored. When you run that math through and consider, an estimated fit out at somewhere between $100 and $200 a square foot, the total for that option has been updated now to between $6 and $8 million.
Just remind me, what was the rate before? What was the number you're looking at for per square foot?
I think we were looking at $5 a square foot before.
And this is just based on the research you've done that it seems to average out around $750.
There was a facility that was discovered, and this was the rate for that particular facility. And so at least we knew that that was more realistic than the estimates that we had discussed previously.
And that facility is 41,000 square feet, because there was also discussion about increasing the size into the 60 to 80,000 square foot range and trying to put everybody together. But
Yeah,
what you're saying here is that there's a specific
So
place.
just to be clear, we didn't do that research. That was done outside of our group. We were fed that information, and I think you're correct that the facilities that they were looking at ranged between 40 to 60. But the the amount of square feet that we need is the 41,000, and the cost per square foot was $7.50.
Right, and Pat, perhaps you can add
Quite simply,
that background.
Gary and I went out and did some research on what was available for rent and lease and in purchase, for that matter, as far as commercial buildings that might be able to be suitable for this purpose. We really only found one that seemed conducive to it. It's right across the street from the town's DPW facility on Alpha Road, across Tracy. And this was a 41,000 foot building in tough shape, and we could buy it for, it's listed at 2.9 million. It's assessed at 2.1 million. So you'd probably be closer to that 2.1 million if on a purchase, but the square foot lease rate was $750, and it's the building itself is a complete gut and redo. So, and that's where you'd be in the $150, $200 range, I think, for construction, for project cost.
Just so we can simplify a little bit, if possible, is that a realistic option or not, based on what you guys have seen? Should we just take it off the table as one of the potential solutions, or should it stay on?
It should stay on, because I still have other locations in that area that I've met with this past week, and I'm waiting for the information, probably be by the end of this week. So if you can give me till the end of this week, I'll be able to give you something that'll be upwards of the 60 or 70,000 square feet, Michael.
Okay.
How does this triple net?
Yes.
It is.
You mean, in addition to the 750, there's the added expenses. Those expenses are probably gonna run anywhere between $2 and $4, correct?
I would guess.
Yeah, so,
So it's 9.
yeah, 10,
Okay, so yeah, round it up.
yeah, so,
So just, and also just, until we know exactly what the building is you're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah, we're guessing here in terms of fit out, what that might mean with respect to parking, site circulation costs. It's a little bit of a crapshoot until we actually get a building that we can, kind of do the research on.
And of course, it is an industrial area,
That was a concern.
absolutely, whether that presents problems or not.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So here's a summary of those options that we presented before. How many modulars would be needed, whether or not the adjacent building, if we're attaching modulars to those buildings, would need to be upgraded, and then the associated cost with those. Just to give you a reminder of the spread that we're talking about, $58 million, all the way down to $2.6 million. And right, these aren't necessarily apples to apples. Each one of them is doing, a little different thing, right? So with that, most of our time will be focused on this new scenario, option E, in response to this question about not adding modulars to the district. And what would it take, right, in order to achieve that particular goal? So in this scenario, the 4 existing elementary schools would become K-3 schools. Both Parker and McCarthy would become 4 through 8 schools. And the existing high school would remain a 9 through 12. So one of the underlying, things that would have to be done is the entire district, save the high school, would have to be reconfigured from a grade configuration point of view, right? And then the asterisk there at the bottom is very important. There are these 2 benchmarks that our analysis has demonstrated we would need to meet in order to do this. And we'll talk more about the educational consequences or educational impact of trying to achieve these 2 benchmarks. And those are an average utilization rate of 85%. And just to remind the board, that means a space is occupied by a group of students 85% of the school day. The other benchmark is at least 23 students per instructional space on average.
Sorry, before you go any farther, when you say 4th through 8th at Parker and McCarthy, is there any way to separate 4th and 5th, or 4th, 5th, and 6th from 7th, 8th?
Good question. All of our analysis to date has demonstrated that neither facility in its current layout is large enough to accommodate 3 grade levels district-wide, right? So there isn't a nice clean break to say put 6, 7, and 8 at McCarthy and,
Right, that would be the
4, 5,
obvious
6
one.
at
4, 5,
Parker,
yeah.
right?
Could we add modulars to McCarthy? I'm assuming that's where the
Well, this is
overload.
the 3 options.
So there's an infinite number of permutations
Okay.
you could wander down. And so the short answer to that is yes, of course, you could pick the modulars up from Parker and go move them over to McCarthy. But that's not the necessarily the task that we were challenged with, right? So these 2 things are important, the 85% and the 23 students per classroom. Okay? So this is sort of a restatement of that. And It was made clear by, Dr. Lang and the other members of our working group that we needed to make sure we were operating under the assumption that grades 4, 5, and 6 would operate as an elementary model, and that only grades 7 and 8 would operate as a middle school model. And we calculate, capacity and utilization a little differently based on those two models. And then you see again the 23 students and 85% utilization rate. And the bottom line is the summary of the work that we've done. We'll get into some details here in just a minute, but essentially if you follow those assumptions, you run the math through, there are 100 classrooms available, and when we shift to this system under these assumptions, we could do it in 100 classrooms. It's just coincidence that it worked out exactly like that. But the big picture message on this slide is that it appears to be theoretically possible to move the 4th grade up. If you were to make some, structural changes to students per classroom and utilization rate, that the 4th grade would fit, in both of those facilities.
So, and also just to focus what we've been doing is we're working, this is to a certain extent a spatial and math equation for this analysis. And we'll talk about what some of the ramifications of proceeding down this path were based on that, but that's what we were asked to go and do. And so we're not yet saying we're going to talk about this, and I think that's part of the discussion that we want to have, making or reaching any conclusions other than that, the math and the spaces, or as we call them, the boxes, worked out this way. We'll talk about the other stuff later.
Yeah. And so when we make a statement like this, and the serendipitous outcome happens to exactly match, right? The first thing we do as an internal team is say, does that really pass the smell test? How did you get there? Right? We know that these two buildings feel full today, and they've only got 5th through 8th in them. So how in the world are you going to fit a whole nother grade level in there? What's the details? So over the next couple of slides, we'll talk about that. So here's the arithmetic to get to the conclusion that 100 classrooms would be needed under this scenario. The enrollment numbers that you see there for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, that's the first big number, the 380, the 371, 386. Those are representative of the enrollment targets that our working group identified from NESDEC's enrollment projections. So that's not this year's enrollment, it's not next year's enrollment, right? Those are the targets that we identified. And so that divided by 23 is that students per classroom, students per space number we were just talking about as one of the benchmarks. So you run that math through, and for grades 4th, 5th, and 6th in an elementary model, you need 17 sections, 16 sections, and 17 sections. And just be aware that currently you have 18 sections in your existing facilities for all 3 of those grade levels. Right? So in addition to those grade level classrooms, we have specials. We have art, music, PE, library. We have other things, right? And so again, assuming 23 students per space, we would need 8 other boxes other than these grade level classrooms to serve grades 4, 5, and 6. When we shift to 7th grade, the algorithm changes a little bit because now we're looking at a middle school model, and the other number comes into play, the 85% utilization rate. So you run that math through, and you need 21 teaching stations for each of those grade levels. And we changed from the word classroom to the word teaching station because in this algorithm, the arts, the musics, the PEs, those specials are included in that 21 number count. So you add all that up, and at least theoretically, right, that sums to 100. Right? The next level of detail we want to communicate to you is how closely we actually looked at the existing schedules. So we're going to use Parker as the example for many of these. So what you see on the screen is the 5th grade schedule, the 6th grade schedule, 7th and 8th grade, right? There are 6 different schedules running in Parker all at the same time.
Right now or under the scenario?
Right now.
Okay.
Right? So we had to look at the existing schedule because there has to be an inefficiency somewhere if we're going to go from 4 grades in each of these buildings to 5 grades in each of these two buildings. And so,
Schedule of, okay. All right, go ahead, continue, I'm sorry.
this is representative of the schedule at Parker, yes. So the 7th and 8th graders, for example, have a Monday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule, and they have a different set of courses for Wednesday, Friday, right? It's extremely complex. Okay, but we looked at it in, minute detail to try to understand where, if any, inefficiencies were occurring. And so if you go to the next slide, Jay. What we found was that for core academic spaces, the average utilization rate was around 66%, not that 85% utilization target benchmark that we have been talking about. And so here's an example of how that might play out. If we look at just the core courses, math, English, social studies, science for 7th grade, there are 189 of those children. Each one of them are seeing those 4 content areas every day. So that's the 189 times 4. Right, if we divide that by 23 students per section, we have a need of 33 sections. Instead of 4 out of 6 periods per day, let's say the schedule changes to 6 out of 7 periods per day, right? That leads to a need of 5.5 classrooms to serve these 4 content areas versus the 8 classrooms that are currently being used. So that's evidence that the current utilization rate may be slightly less efficient than this 85% benchmark that the MSBA and that we're using in this analysis. So, I know there was a lot of math in there, but the summary of this investigation, is summarized on this slide. This appears to be theoretically possible, right? The math appears to work, as Brad said, but there's lots of things that have to happen in order for that to actually be possible. It is a relatively low capital cost, should it be executed, right? Because it would not require modulars to be added to the district. There are some caveats. It requires district-wide grade reconfiguration. We already mentioned that. But if we were to maintain the district's current educational model, right, we didn't account for 4 additional classrooms, right? I mentioned the difference between 18, 18, 18, and 18 grade level sections that you have today versus the 17s and 16s that we mentioned in this analysis. Over the next year, the district would have to create an entirely new daily schedule. There's potential redistricting involved. Anytime you're reconfiguring grades in buildings, the possibility of redistricting needs to be considered. Special education. We assumed that when 4th grade moved up, that perhaps the special education services that would come with them maybe could be shared with some existing 5th grade special education spaces, but perhaps that's not true. So there could be as many two additional classrooms necessary, again, to mimic what's going on currently.
Excuse me, are the 2 included in the 100 or not?
They are not. They are not. So the 4 additional to maintain the district's existing sections are not included in the 100, nor are the 2 additional classrooms for special ed.
And are we including the autism spectrum program at Parker?
So we believe that we identified those as being special education functions currently, and so they would remain, right? This analysis doesn't push them out of the building.
Is that program fully occupied yet? I thought we were growing that over the next couple of years as kids moved up from the program at Byam.
The room, excuse me, there are actually now 3 classrooms at Byam for the students on the autism spectrum. There is 1 classroom in a little smaller breakout room at Parker for the next classroom. And then at the high school, actually, we're actually growing into the high school for this year. So this will be the first year that there are kids going up to the high school program as well. But at Parker, they've been able to basically maintain just within that 1 classroom with the small little offset room. One of the things we did flag is that if the 4th grade come up from Byam, we would in addition to this, you couldn't have 4th and 8th grade kids in the same classroom. It's too wide of an age range, particularly for the special needs students. So we would need an extra classroom. We didn't know which building. We assumed it would go to Parker, but we're dealing with big numbers here. So there may be an additional class that would have to be added for the 4th grade NEC going to Parker. And that's not included in the number here.
All right, so it's not, I mean, it's not 100, right? It's
Well, it dep-
101 or 102.
Well, depend-
106.
It depends, though, because part of the mandate here was that we're going to make changes,
Right.
right? So, so when we go and we make those changes, right, things necessarily aren't consistent with where they are today. So this represents, for example, going from a 66 or a 71% utilization rate and having to bring that up to 85%, some of those things change. There may be some things that are going to change operationally, and those are identified here. What's in the parenthetical there is really just an identification of what it would be to bring it back to the status quo. So there's a little bit of an apple and orange thing going on here, if you follow what I'm saying. So we want to make sure that when we go and say something like requires district-wide grade configuration in order to affect the change, that's really, okay, what would be sacrificed in order to make that change?
Well, if what we're talking about is sacrificing the ASP, then I no, I don't want to do that. I mean, we're going to send those kids back out?
Well, he still has points to go through.
Yeah.
Let's finish the.
But I agree, that's an extra room. Like this is, how would you squeeze? So what are the considerations that would have to come into play to meet the 100 classrooms that we have?
I think we
So-
understand. I think my gut is, before you even go through the next couple of points, is just because it's free doesn't mean there isn't a cost. And it's a
Right.
human cost versus a monetary cost.
Right.
So.
That's fair.
Yeah. So.
But we know minimally that you'd have to add 2 special ed rooms to take care of those 4th graders coming up to whichever schools are in. We're assuming 1 and 1. We don't know what the mix is going to be, but potentially there's another room for the NEC program.
Honestly, I mean, just even a little flexibility. I mean, how much you're filling up these classrooms. What if a pipe bursts in the Parker and it knocks out 3 classrooms, right? I mean, then you're crowding all these kids into another classroom? Middle of a school year, right?
Well, that's
Well,
true
that's-
today.
You got that.
Yeah,
It's
that
true
happens.
today, but now when you're at capacity, it's a whole different problem.
Yep.
But we're at a capacity elementary when that
I-
happens
Yeah.
today.
Well, I know we have capacity problems, but I'm just saying,
Yep.
that's why you don't fill things to capacity, and this is why I didn't want to explore this free option, is that I want to have a classroom, all these classrooms so decked out that if there is an emergency or something happens in the building, you have to close off a bunch of classrooms, you have to cram more kids into a class. So,
I think that's one of the discussion points, though, to either kind of proof this model in or out, or whatever the discussion's going to be. We had to get this on the table so that you could actually identify all these operational issues with it. We kind of left off at SPED, but there was, still 4 other, I don't know, Jason, if you can jump in,
Go
but
and
like
tag
still
that.
4 other things to tag on.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about loss of specials, but go ahead.
Yep. So, obviously, anytime there's a huge schedule change and/or teachers are no longer owning their rooms, 4th grade going up to the a middle school, a building that has middle schoolers in it, those are all huge cultural shifts for everybody across the spectrum. The loss of specials line, right? When we assume that grades 4, 5, and 6 would operate on an elementary model, right? Currently, through grade 4, the elementary children are only receiving 1 special per day. Grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all receiving 2 specials per day. Currently. So in this scenario, when we assume that grades 5 and 6 are going to operate like elementary school, one of those assumptions was, in order to fit in this 100, classroom box, that those 2 grades no longer get 2 specials per day, but they go down to the elementary scenario where they only receive 1 special per day. So that's the loss of specials that we're talking about there.
Can you make examples of specials? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
So art, music, PE, tech education, library.
Wow.
Right.
It'd be I mean, I think too at the middle schools, like at the elementary school level, the kids do rotate, kind of a special per day. So they see the art, music, phys ed, they go to the library. In the middle schools is when they break out and they do orchestra and band and chorus and whatnot. So they're seeing 2 specials a day in some cases, or they're having extension type blocks. But the only way to fit into the 100 classrooms, basically 4, 5, and 6, if they're all together in the building, they have to assume an elementary model. So they basically go losing that second special. So they would lose the orchestras and or whatever the extra band programs
They
are.
lose it on a daily basis, or they just lose it flat out?
You wouldn't be able to
You
fit it
couldn't
into
do it
the
5 days a
schedule.
week.
You
How
could
many
only
days a
do
week
one.
could you do? You'd 1 day a week
One
for
day a-
orchestra?
Because it would be a special. It'd be a one period per day per week class. It would almost be like an elementary model.
So,
Right, the literacy block would be longer, the math block would be longer, but they would lose that specialist time where they were able to rotate through and see them for a semester. See, middle school's on a semester schedule as well.
So basically, it kills the orchestra program, it
Yeah,
kills the
yeah.
band program, it kills the orchestra program.
Art,
Art as
all
well.
specials. I mean, why should the arts suffer on this? I mean, I don't.
this is a little personal for somebody like me. So I was a kid, and I've told the story before, that I struggled in school, and I learned a lot more about English during library periods, where I could go off and read on my own and do my own thing and not worry about a teacher or homework assignments. So imagine losing library for somebody that really struggles with reading and wants to do it on their own time, or somebody that gets their social skills from a band, right, or whatever. I mean, that's
There's no equivalent to that experience.
right. There's no equivalent to that experience. You can't learn that in a book. So that's
Yeah, and right, as your design team, right, we're not advocating
No. we
for
get it.
this,
no.
idea.
I think everybody wants to speak for the record on this. I think is really why we're
Wanna
saying
keep
it out
the
loud.
pitchforks
Yeah, so-
and the shovels.
I
and everything
think-
down
right,
to
no,
the-
I think they're
I
directed
think
at the presentation more than you. So I think you're
I
good.
think it's important that we make it explicit, because
Right.
I don't know that you're gonna get a single path forward coming out of tonight. I think you'll get some sense, but I think, it's already clear, the cultural shift part of it, the teachers having to share rooms, we're going to get input on that, I think. But what I want to bring out is what loss of specials means, right? I want to hear from the orchestra families. I want to hear from the art families. I want everybody to understand what a big shift this would be.
Yeah, fair enough. When we say appears to be little flexibility, right, we're talking about, exactly what you mentioned, John, and that, if there's, something happens unexpectedly to the enrollment, right, or, something happens with the facility, right, we've got, instead of, 2 periods per day in each classroom available as overflow, right, there's only 1 period per day, in each classroom as overflow, and you're utilizing the building much more efficiently than you are today, and that in and of itself creates a little less flexibility. And then the impact to our long-term master plan options, everything we've prepared to date was based on the assumption that, utilization rates, students per classroom, the daily schedules that are in existence today will likely continue into the future. And this scenario that we're exploring operates under a complete different set of assumptions. And so if this were okay for, short-term, full-day kindergarten, right, it raises the question, is it okay for long-term in our master planning scenarios that are, the bigger picture than this?
I think one of the things we want to bring out again tonight is that when we say short-term, I think we should start putting numbers on it. Short-term in this context means 7 or 8 years, because that's how long it'll be before we get a permanent building option brought forward, or completed, I guess, and usable. So it sounds different to say short-term, right? People think, well, I can do anything for a week, but we're talking about children spending the better part of their scholastic careers in this sort of a format, as
right.
opposed to.
And imagine during orientation bringing a parent through a school like that, completely crowded. I mean, and by the way, you're not going to there's no band. Sorry, you don't get that in Chelmsford. Imagine somebody buying a house in Chelmsford. And for all the educational impacts full-day kindergarten has, there are economic impacts too. So when somebody's looking to purchase in a town, if they're transferring their kid from Billerica or Lowell, wherever, They're going to look at these facilities, and they're going to make judgments on them.
And
What's in the news and what
one of the
people
jewels
say.
in our crown is our fine arts department. So,
How many Tammy Awards did they get nominated for?
Yeah, and
Just because the numbers work
Are you Wikipedia
doesn't
over
necessarily mean that's the solution. I mean, we certainly don't want to be the one to go to the parents and tell them we're cutting their arts program on their children. I mean, I don't want to be that guy. Does anybody up?
No.
Do you want to be that guy?
the
I don't want
chairman
to be that
speaks for
guy.
us, though.
You know,
Chairman, do you
so
want to be that guy?
I don't think we should be looking at anything, and I know this was a lot of heavy lifting, but
I don't.
this is 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. This is what this is, and who's suffering? Special ed could be potentially suffering. Who's suffering?
Yeah.
Arts and entertainment, you know, for these kids, they're suffering. Why are these kids being asked to give up something that we all admit is part of their fabric, part of their growth? So just because the numbers work doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way to go. This is evident.
And I think that's what this slide here is intended to go and convey, is that, you know, we were asked to go and, you know, analyze this. And, you know, it wasn't actually, I think part of what we had characterized here is that, you know, there was a fine for 100, and actually the 100 came out of the fact that we were looking at operating things differently. That's what what ended up happening.
Right.
And so here, what we said is, if that's the fine for, right, to go and see if you can't do this, well, what happens? You know, it might have been something we might have found, you know, that it could have worked out great.
Sure.
But I think if you're looking to go and, you know, try and draw, you know, a positive conclusion from this, you know, it helps to bolster, and we don't know where you're going to come out on this, but at least it puts you in a position for, you know, as part of the analysis and what gets included in the master plan, is that you really have gone out and looked at everything potentially that could be out there. And, you know, some of those choices may just not have been palatable. Maybe this is, maybe this isn't, we don't, you know, that's going to be your guys' decision. But at least now you're able to go and say, we really have looked at a very broad spectrum of opportunities that are out there, and, you know, in your opinion, you know, this is the one that seemed to make the most sense for you.
You did exactly what we asked you to do, and we really appreciate it. And and by doing this exercise, I think for me personally, speaks volumes, because now I can say this is absolutely not a recommendation we should follow, because there are special ed kids that are going to suffer, and there are arts and entertainment that are going to suffer. But you did the exercise. We can look at the entire town and say, hey, listen, we exhausted every avenue, even trying to, redistrict, reconfigure, and it's still, there are kids that are going to suffer. So,
Well,
thank you.
You know, the other thing is, maybe there is still something that we can build on coming out of this, and that if we shift the focus a little bit, instead of saying that this is the no-cost option, we call it the low-cost option. If you add the 6 additional classrooms to maintain the current specials, if you put another classroom in to make sure that we keep the SPED program in-house, do we wind up with a situation where it doesn't require as many portables as some of the other
So,
proposals?
No.
I don't.
No, if you look, when you look at the summary of the other modulars that we're adding, the largest one we had was 10. Four
And
at,
this is 10 right there, right?
4 at Center and 6 at Westlands to house the community ed program. So that would be,
Yes, but I mean, I'm willing to look at a district-wide grade reconfiguration, right? I'm not, at this point, I'm not willing to look at losing the special. So, I mean, there's no middle ground there?
That was one of the points why I think it was important to pursue this, because, and initially, we were batting around coming up to similar conclusions, but then it came down to, well, what if you only need a couple of modulars per building? You're still accomplishing keeping all the kindergartners in their neighborhood
That's right.
schools.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
So, that was a positive. This situation would bring you closer to an 85% utilization, which MSBA on any project is going to look favorably on, because if you're at 70% utilization, MSBA is probably going to pass you over if there's somebody in more need, and it's all about exhibiting need to MSBA when you go for these kinds of projects. So if you don't exhibit the right need or more need than the next community, it's a detriment.
Right.
So that's why it was important to look at this and then just say, okay, well, maybe it doesn't work, being that close, but should we look at it a little closer to say, a couple of more modulars at each school? Does it help to make that work? And, this may not be the total answer, but, it
Are
could
you
be.
saying that the state will not give you the money based on anything less than 85% utilization?
It's just
Well,
your odds.
you could possibly get something, but I'd let the experts talk to that.
Yeah, so the 85% that we keep referencing is a component of the MSBA's guidelines. There are lots of examples where schools have been designed to meet that 85%. There are lots of other examples where schools have been designed to be slightly less than that. And where that tipping point is solely at the discretion of the MSBA, right? They may say, you know what, 71%, 5 of 7, we can live with that. But 66%, we'd like you to be a little more efficient with that, right? And until you have that conversation with them, you won't know for sure. But a good rule of thumb is to try to hit this 85%, and start the conversation there.
So there's just a couple of things. I mean, first of all, if we can get some efficiency gains out, then I think we should look at that, right? If we can do a better job of utilizing the space we have. The other thing is, if you have portables at a middle school level as opposed to an elementary school level, I think people perceive that differently. If you've got kids moving around anyway, I think it's easier to rotate 6th, 7th, 8th graders
Oh, yeah.
in and out of a school than it is to rotate kindergartners in and out of a school. So, again, I think this is certainly something that's worth looking at. It's just a question of what we can live with.
I think to keep it equal, though, we're looking at the same number of modulars as if we just we use one of the other solutions, right? I'm actually at the point with options. I think and I don't know, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I have a feeling other people feel this way too. I think we've seen enough options, and I think this was the last option I think we want to look at, and I don't want to look at any other options. I want to make some selections and maybe try to whittle it down tonight, maybe to 2 or 3. We just need to get somewhere. We need to move forward. I mean, fall meeting is coming up at a excruciatingly fast pace. So I don't want to see any other variations of this. And by the way, we should label this, if we show it to anybody, we should label this one the human cost as opposed to monetary cost, because this is all taking away from children and
But-
parents.
So you disagree that if we were to add modulars to this model,
Why would we, if we're going to add 10 modulars, just add the 10 modulars and the solution that's already made and just implement full-day kindergarten with that solution? Why add all this, making new schedules and
Okay.
reorganizing? That's much more complex than just adding 10 modulars throughout and adding full-day K.
But if this gets us closer to 85% and lets us show need for the MSBA,
I think
that's a step. That's a
Where are we
step
now?
towards where we want to be.
Utilization?
Averaging 66% and in the core classrooms. There are some spaces
You're
that
talking
are.
for the building project.
Yeah.
That really does come into play, in my experience, primarily at the high school level. When you're talking about new building projects with the SBA, they understand a high school, it's a different model. You don't commit to spaces. You don't own your classrooms. Kids are used to, and teachers are used to, going into rooms and teaching and vacating the room for someone else. That definitely comes into play at the high school. It comes into play when you're negotiating how big of a school you're going to be able to build, because they're going to want to take a look at that. And you might say you want to have a lesser utilization rate. They might be looking at that 85, and they could say, you know what, as part of a negotiation, well, we're only going to give you X number of square feet. You can, we'll reimburse you for this. If you want to have a better utilization rate or lesser utilization rate, then you're going to pay for it. I mean, that definitely comes into play at the high school level. I haven't seen that come into play quite as much at the elementary school level, and I think the middle school level's mid-ground. I mean, they want to see, obviously, efficiency of space, but I think they also understand community preference around how you utilize an educational program at the middle school level. And do you treat it more like an elementary school, or do you treat it like a high school? So, I mean, these things are definitely in play, but I don't think there's like a lock hard number. We certainly want to try to increase the room utilization when we can, and I think that's why we looked at it, the 7th and 8th grade level. It's more acceptable to operate a high school type schedule where kids, they do rotate around to 4 different teachers instead of staying in a classroom all day. It's much more palatable than at the 4th, 5th, 6th grade level. And what we looked at it is at the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade level, we really feel educationally that needs to operate on an elementary school level methodology. That kids need to own a classroom, that they need to have the materials there, the teachers need to have the materials there, and you can't have a 4th or 5th grade child rotating to 4 different teachers. It just doesn't work. So when we're looking at these numbers, again, to kind of go back to that and maintain some of the existing, and I think this is where we got to look at the numbers, existing programs and spaces, you basically have to look at adding your 12 or 13 classes to get back to where we are today, to still offer the musics and arts and sped programs and things like that. And I think my concern at that point was that this still allows very little flexibility space-wise, right? So that's still also accounted for, increasing those room utilizations so that, God forbid, the schedule doesn't come out perfect. You don't have a lot of wiggle room within your schedule here. The other issue that we had, that again, it kind of gets talked about, but schedules work in schools when you have even number of teacher teams. So when you have 18 or you have 16, it's just the way the specialists have to rotate in and out. You need an even number. So to go from the 18 to 17 is going to be problematic, because what you're going to end up doing is having excess specialists in the schedule because you can't have less. And it doesn't make for a good schedule. So, I mean, they were just several like programmatic things that I think when you start looking at, should this option be explored? Absolutely. I mean, does it warrant further review? Potentially. But if you're going to be looking at a scenario where you're adding 10 or 12 or 14 classrooms, and you still have to go make all of these changes, 4th graders and 8th graders being in the same building, and you've got to revamp the schedule so everyone's on, a common schedule. At what point does it become too much that it's just educationally not palatable? And again, we're not talking a year, right? If this would be a much different situation if you were saying, and I think I used this afternoon, but you've had a school building you thought was going to be ready to open in September, and it's not going to be ready then. It's going to open in December or January. Could you do this for 6 months? Yeah, no one's going to want to, but you might have to. But if we're looking at this being a 6 or 8 year short-term solution, and God forbid something happen or the bigger project doesn't go forward, then this is what we're living with, for years to come. I think that's where you have to kind of ask yourself, is, educationally, is it worth it? And I think that's where you run into some problems.
And it's only the difference, so we've already identified that we need 10 pods. And in some of these other scenarios, what was the number of pods, and I apologize, the number of pods if we put them all at the elementary schools in order to keep 12? So we're not talking about 12 pods, we're talking about 2 more pods. So we're already going for 10 in this scenario, and we got to change all these things around.
Right.
And we got to put 4th graders with 8th graders, and we got to lose special ed, and we got to lose arts and entertainment. I call it arts and entertainment, I apologize.
The A&E
Fine
channel.
arts, yeah, exactly. But for 2 more pods, we don't have to do any of
that.
this. I don't understand.
Well, but
I
it's
guess I'm
not,
missing
it's, again, I think it's not quite that simple, and because you have to talk about where they site. And frankly, Parker and McCarthy, it's easy to understand where they might put pods. At Byam, it's difficult to understand where you're gonna put 3
All these
pods.
things have problems, and we just
Yeah.
got to solve
I
them.
mean,
Here's
what
what
are the
I want to
problems
do.
there?
I just want to stop giving options to Dorn and Whittier. I want to stop saying, well, now let's explore this option a little bit more. I think we have the gist of all the options. I think it's time to move on and select a couple options. And I'm getting a little worked up on this. I feel like I'm working for Congress right now, like something's going to sit in a committee for months and months and months, and no decision is made. We got to pick something. And if it's the least and a modular at each, and then we explore this just for the sake of saying we have a free option, fine. But I don't want to fine tune this and go back and say, well, now do the math with 10 more of this, and then tell us what that's going to cost. I think we've this horse is dead. This horse jumped off the cliff 2 weeks ago and landed, and this popped out of it. And let's just keep the horse dead.
Well, I think what's also important, to your point, John, I think what's
And I like
important
horses.
is...
I apologize.
No. Okay, so the math works, but
It
after
doesn't.
listening to Dr. Lang, there's going to be a cost to the kids in quality.
Right.
So just because the math works doesn't make this right.
Not just that, you're talking about parents. Now, if you implement this next year, there's probably kids that aren't going to be going to the same school, I imagine, because you're going to have to, like, shift people out, right?
Well, your 4th graders would be leaving a year early.
I mean, that is a change that parents aren't planning for, so it's a change.
I think, anything we do is going to impact most of the families in the district in one way or another. I think it's a serious mistake for people to look at this as something that only affects people with kids who are going into kindergarten next year.
Oh, no.
Like it or not, this is going to affect every kid in elementary school, and there's probably going to be knock-on effects at the middle school and high school. That's
Right.
just what we're looking at. This is not a question for a couple of parents to answer. This is a question for the town to answer.
Town needs, absolutely,
Quality, too.
right.
It's the
But I
quality,
think
it's
it
the
is,
experience.
I think it is part of our responsibility to minimize those impacts. So, and that's why I've always been leaning towards to put modules at each school, because it doesn't change their home schools, doesn't change the bus schedules. And there's a lot of things that minimize impact on kids and families and just parents in general, puts less buses on the road. And that's kind of why I've always been leaning towards that. I think we should try to figure out the option that minimizes the amount of impact it has in terms of day-to-day life for people. So.
But I think, we were challenged with finding a no-cost solution.
And I do,
That's as
I don't
close as
want
we
to
can come.
dive down this rabbit hole. We know about what 10 modules is going to cost because it's already on the other slide. We've already looked at it. So why even do it? I agree. Why pile on all this complexity on top of 10? We already have a solution that has 10. This is just not a good solution.
Which
I'm
is the
not willing-
lowest cost, by the way, which is the 10 modules. So far, am I accurate? Besides this one. Because if we go with the 10 module, which is Center and Westlands, that's 10 modules, is that correct?
Yes, but that's different than what John is speaking about.
Summary slide?
John's talking about, I believe you're talking about
I'm
putting
talking
them
about
at every
option.
school.
Yeah, because my point was, for 2
7.9
more
million.
modules, we can have John's idea for 2 more modules.
Right.
Not for 12 more modules, because this scenario has 10 modules.
Right.
The other scenario has 10 modules at Westland and Center. So for only 2 more modules, we get what John's point is,
Option A,
which is,
disconnected.
that now they're at every one of the schools. Am I saying it the right way, John?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. And you're not overlaying a ton of complexity to the operations and how I'm going to change the schedules and I'm going to redistrict, which is a ton of work.
I'm going for 10 anyways. What's the
Right. Well, mine just go for 12.
what's
Anyway,
the cost for 2 more?
I just don't want to put another option on the table. I really don't want to see another
I
option.
think that the option that it can't be on the table is not viable. It's
These
just too
guys
many
have really just
sacrifices.
gone
Thanks
above
again,
and beyond.
guys. You guys,
I mean-
thank you very much.
I mean, what they've done and the patience that
Yeah.
they've, welcome to Chelmsford, by the way, the patience that you guys have really put into doing this has been incredible, because this is complex, and every time you come back, we'd say, okay, a couple more options. Well, why don't we look at it this way? I think we got a bunch of good options. Let's just figure out which ones are the best, and let's move forward, because we got to get to town meeting soon, and the fall's coming.
Well,
Winter is coming, as we say
The
in Game of
problem
Thrones.
is, we wind up back with what Paul said, which is that this is not a vote for town meeting. This is gonna be a public vote,
Oh, absolutely.
right? So we need to show that we've done our due diligence and explored every possible option before we go in front of the
Right.
voters and say, give us $8 million.
And we're saying we've explored them now. I mean, there are no more options I think we need to look at, right? The options are out there. People are going to make judgments on it. Whatever we decide to go forward with the town meeting into the ballot, they're either going to say yes or no. And they might say yes or they might say no 3 times, because that is the magic number, right?
No, that's not gonna be magic at all. That's
Well,
gonna
it's
be
gonna
a
be terrible,
disaster.
So let me just ask one more question. That last scenario you just showed, we need 10 pods, is that correct?
To keep it.
Keep everything you have.
Okay.
Right.
So is that 10 pods also give us the same number of arts and the same number of special ed? Does that 10 pods accomplish that? Or even with the 10 pods, we still have a deduction in special ed, or a reduction, I should say, in arts?
You won't know the nitty-gritty details until you actually try to create that schedule. But those numbers that we reported on that slide change the assumption from what if you meet the 23 and the 85 to what if we continue to do what we're doing today, how many extra modulars would we need? So that's a reasonable assumption that yes, you could continue what you're doing today if you take that option E scenario and add the full number of spaces that we identified on that
For
slide.
10 modules,
Yeah.
So that would be 10 instead of 12.
Well, can I jump in for 1 second?
Yep.
It's 6 for the specials,
6 for the
4
specials.
for the core.
4 for the core, that's 10.
It's 10, but that didn't include the sped.
Can you
And,
go back?
and 2 for special ed. So
At
that's
least 2, if
12,
not
not-
next.
That's not
It's,
10.
it's 12 or
We
13.
need 12 pods to keep everything consistent, and we don't cut, to some extent, the experience for arts, and we don't hurt special ed. We still need 12 pods to keep it the same, correct?
Keep the program the same.
To keep, fair enough, to keep the program the
Still
same.
need to change.
Right, okay,
Yep.
but to keep the
Culture.
experience the same, is that correct? So if we need 12 pods, and we have a scenario that doesn't disrupt the whole thing, what am I missing?
Nothing.
Okay,
And that's my,
tell us, Gary, tell us why we're gonna, how we're gonna do
I'm
this.
not gonna say that, I'm just saying that, since the options are out there, and one thing we tried to explore was, 7, 8 at Parker, with 4, 5, 6 at McCarthy. If you were gonna do pods, could you do pods at 1 and accomplish that? Because when when you put them in one location,
Right.
there's a lot less cost for the mobilization and demobilization. And then that would still give you sort of the elementary 4 to 6 version
Experience,
versus the
right.
7 to 8, no loss of any of the thing. We just couldn't do that with this model, spreading it out that way. You would have to have split up a class, which you weren't gonna do.
we're trying to keep.
So I'm just asking that question from the simple fact that you'd go to your elementary school from K, right to
Yep.
3, so you don't lose that.
Yep.
And you might have the possibility, if the pods work, to do that.
In fact,
And
you could-
maybe, I'm not gonna quote numbers, but the 7.9, maybe it's 6.
Well, that's the thing.
Because it's
If we
one
can, if we can chop off a couple of pods, that makes a difference, right? If we can do it for 10 pods instead of 12, that's an option worth exploring. And you can put, I ran the numbers over the weekend, 4 and 5 fit into Parker over the next 5 years, based on who we've got now, right? That leaves 6, 7, 8 in McCarthy, which is severely overcrowded. You would need a lot of pods, but I don't know how many exactly. I didn't try to calculate it. I was looking at it with 20 kids in a class instead of 23. If you guys are close to having that kind of information, then take the last steps on it and bring it forward. Because we have to do everything we can to reduce the number of pods needed. I agree with you that at this point, any solution needs pods.
Right.
But there's a difference between 10 pods and 12.
Right, there is a difference, and the 10-pod option is all human costs. It's all people coming out of their schools, it's people changing their
No,
schedules.
that's what we're saying. If you took all the 7th and 8th graders, put them at one school, and put the 4th, 5th, 6th at a different school, or 4 and 5 at one school and 6, 7, 8 at another, you're not really changing anything from what you've got right now.
I think we need to figure out the option. And then I actually have no opposition to looking at grade configuration changes to loosen things up in terms of overpopulated classrooms and things like that. I don't think it makes sense.
Disagree with you. I respectfully.
Yeah, it's fine.
I disagree with a 4th grader being with an 8th grader. I
If
think
we could
that's,
separate them, that would be ideal. I don't want an 8th grader at the high school, and I'd rather not have a 4th grader in a middle school.
so,
There are no ideal options, and the only two options for me and I've spent a lot of time just grinding this out and mentally, and the two options that make the most sense to me are option A, disconnected, the 12, and then maybe doing the least space. But I think there are consequences for that too. Any of those things have consequences. I just think overcomplicating the solution is not the answer. So simple solutions are typically better. They're easy to administer. That's just where I'm at. I'm not against looking at grade reconfiguration, but we have to come out of this meeting with some kind of idea of what we're looking at. We can't keep doing this. We can't committee this full day K to death.
We have to.
Well, we have. That's what I'm saying. It's
maybe
dead.
we should be, maybe.
so how many pods could we
it's
be
not.
talking
We're
about,
still getting
Michael,
new
or
ideas.
Gary? Maybe
They're not even commissioned
Gary,
to
other
do
ones
this
just
work.
started.
Sal,
Tell me.
This isn't even part of their scope.
But Sal, to be honest with you at this point, okay, we had a 4 o'clock meeting of our committee, and we're here. We saw what you saw, okay? Thank God for teachers and administrators in the room that know the teaching aspect, because I don't come from that background. I come from the building background.
all right? We didn't have much more time than you have to look at this, all right? And the first question that was asked was we could not separate the way we wanted to, because one class would have been split somewhere, and you don't do that. You know, talking like we are now, I'm not opposed to John's, other than, let's say you wanted to look at option A, disconnect. What is the viability and how long would it take, door Whittier, not to go do some big blown up thing, but is it 6, is it 8, is it 10, is it 12, at either the McCarthy or the Parker, to go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? And then have those two options and make a decision. Or if you want to keep in the rental one, that's fine too.
Well, you're going to work on the rental one, right? So we know we've got information coming on that. No reason to cut that off at this point. Now that, you know, again, it's kind of like Paul brought up the idea of this no cost, where you just shove a grade forward. And
I don't think Paul-
once that idea comes out on the table, it has to be addressed.
And it has
we
been.
can't just say we're not going to look at it. Right, I agree, and we've looked at that, and we see the weaknesses and flaws. But now there's another idea, which is 4, 5, 6 at one and 7, 8 at another.
Michael, I just want to, for this,
Why not answer that
for the
question?
record, I don't think Paul Cohen said, I'm only interested in a no cost.
He didn't say he was only interested. He
We
said
should
he
have
saw that as a
He
potential
just wants to
solution.
be able to say, did you check the box?
Absolutely.
And we've checked the
When he
box.
talks about being bold, I'm sure it's not,
Right,
you
we
know,
can't go-
jamming
we
at
can't go to them every-
85% at every one of the schools.
We can't go back to them every time they come, every 2 weeks they come out here and say, okay, now we really like option A, but we want option A 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because there are so many,
I think
there are
there's some of
100
these-
ways we could do any of these things.
Yeah, you're right, John.
There's
right.
X amount of options. We have the free option. We can tweak it after if we want to select it to go forward for more consideration. We pick 3 or 4, but we come out of this meeting with at least an idea what we want to do.
Folks, excuse me, the superintendent would like to just comment.
Just comment for 2 seconds.
We pay him.
I'm on your bonus committee.
Yellow right there.
Couple things. We didn't. There's no slide on this, but we did look at the scenario of 8th grade going to the high school and revamping that. It doesn't work. So I don't want people to think we didn't look at that. It has no viability. So that was looked at and it's not out there. When we ran rough numbers, and again, if you were going to have to put the 4th to 8th in the middle schools, it's much more palatable to have, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 4, 5, 6, less palatable, 7, 8. Parker works for 4, 5, right? And you could do that. It would be a nice elementary school model, you do that. The problem you run into when you get to the McCarthy is that rough math, just based on existing programs and size, it comes up, we were doing it before, like 14 classrooms short, to be able to put 3 grade levels at, like, do 6th, 7th, and 8th at McCarthy. So, and that was common, that was core classes, not even taking into consideration potential extra space for allied arts or specialists or whatever we want to call them.
Right, well,
So I think that's why we
at a
didn't.
0.85, that's like, what, 11 classrooms?
What
or
do you
11
mean, 0.85?
pods?
No, before, he's saying.
No, I'm
14.
saying before you even get to specials, you need an extra 14 classrooms. Then you need extra classrooms for specials
Okay.
to get them all into the McCarthy. When we just looked, like right now, McCarthy has 10 strands at each grade level. Parker has 8, right? So McCarthy has capacity for 40 classrooms. If you did 3 grade levels, you'd be looking at, the 18, all flipping over to McCarthy, you'd need 54 spaces. So if you only have 40 now and you need 54, that's 14 core,
Okay.
not even considering.
Special.
Before considering
You've already got
specials.
specials there.
You'd need more if you're bringing in 14 classrooms of kids. Those kids aren't part of those allied art blocks now. So they would need music and phys. You'd have to add additional spaces for those kids to go to when they were in. So we just knew,
You'd have multiple band rooms?
well, you'd need multiple art rooms. You've got to do
You have the
allied arts
capacity of the kids.
for those kids. They would have to have a room to go
Well,
to.
okay, and that can't be addressed through,
You could through
changing the
modulus.
schedule. Or through, well,
would
obviously
be
you'd have
some
to
efficiency.
add some modules. The question is, how many modulars would you really have to add? And if that number is more than 12, then I agree, then we don't need to pursue that
But
any farther.
Let me offer this anecdotally. When we did this analysis, right, we're looking at essentially considering Parker and McCarthy as one facility. right? We've got a total number of spaces available to us. Regardless of what grades you put where, the math is the same. Right?
Okay.
If you think about it in that context, can everybody sort of get their head wrapped around that idea? So, in order to fit in the boxes that you've got, you're going to have to execute all of these changes that we've talked about. You're going to try to put a few more kids in each classroom. You're going to try to use spaces more efficiently. You're going to have to change all those things. Right? If the assumption is let's try to do what we're doing today and move one grade up, even if we move that one grade up into McCarthy and that becomes a 4, 5, 6, right? Those additional spaces are still going to be required, right? So you're even by that math, you're looking at least 12.
Okay.
Even if you're looking at putting 3 grades in one facility and 2 grades in the other.
That's the math right there. then.
Right, so it's 12.
Roughly, yeah, right. Like I said, it's anecdotal because we haven't run that scenario, but we looked at the big picture here, considering these 2 facilities together, and that's what we've presented. And so, where you
So you're
slice
saying
and
it
dice
doesn't, it doesn't matter where you cut,
Yeah.
right? You can split them different ways,
Right.
but basically 100
Right.
classrooms needed, 100
Right.
classrooms full of kids, plus the extras for the
Right.
specials.
That's right.
I mean, I couldn't imagine going to a PTO and presenting this and being like, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing, because people would just.
Well, you might need, under this scenario, listening to Dr. Lane, there's a good chance you would need even more pods
Right.
than one of the scenarios.
We just try to come out of this without giving any more options. I think we've done the options.
I think
we're
that,
done.
yeah, but you know what? You can now say,
We've
we've
done it.
exhausted
Right.
all the avenues.
Now
and
we've done it, and we've talked about it, and we've debated about it, and I just think we need to come out of this. Like, go back to the list. Like, the $58 million option isn't going to happen. Why is it even on the list anymore? We should take it off.
Well, it's actually the next slide, Jay, if you want to.
Oh,
Or it's at the end, or whatever.
There
You know what I
go.
mean? Like, there are options we can just take off right now and say, these are what we're looking at, and these are the options we can go to the town with and say, these are the. We've done it. We've done the work. We've ground through all of this. We've had the meetings. We've done the visioning sessions. We've done all the work, and the best option that we could find was X. And if we go to the town with a reasonable argument like that, and the people on the committee can go out and shake some hands and meet some voters and get people on board, we might be able to get it done. And maybe even on the first try, because that would be actual magic. That would be real magic, if we can get it done. That's all. That's all I got to say about it.
Yeah, what do you want me to do?
Why
Why don't you go home, Al?
Over to you, Al.
Got it.
So you guys agree? Do you think we should try to narrow down a couple of these?
Well, is the presentation over?
This is the end of our presentation. The next slide, I think, actually says questions and discussions, which we've had a lot of.
I agree with John.
Covered that.
What- I
Don,
think
I agree
I think
with you.
what we were hoping for,
Yeah.
right? We need something to put in the book. We need some guidance to know how this might impact our other master plan scenarios. And so if it's appropriate and achievable to, either whittle down the list or to give us some direction to move forward, that would be helpful to us this evening.
Mine is the 12 in the lease space, depending
Can we
on.
use letters?
A or B, yeah, use the letters, John. So you're saying A,
is-
E,
Wanna go back
Is
to
it easier to look at the other?
It's other
Yeah,
ones.
okay.
that one's-
Option A, disconnected, and lease space are the 2 options I think are the most viable. If we find the right space. Those are the 2 that I've always liked the most. Option A, because it doesn't disrupt people's districts, it doesn't disrupt busing schedules. And option C, I like because potentially we could get the right cost if we got the right deal.
Right, but remember, with option C, it does not include your transportation.
Got it. And then that does add operational costs. But those are the 2 options that were always been the most attractive to me. All the other ones,
Right, just also to be clear, the cost estimates there,
yeah.
right, those are capital costs,
No, I got it. Capital. Yep.
not operational costs.
And remind me one more time on D2, that assumes no increase in the population at CHIPS?
That's correct.
So it might realistically be more like 12 with
Could be.
growth, if there's growth.
We gave 2, they're using 2 extra spaces, and we kept those 2 extra spaces with our program.
Okay. So there's a possibility of an increase, but 10 is the best estimate,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I will agree with John as far as the option A connected.
That's gotta go.
That's big of you.
Yeah, you like that?
Stepped out on that one.
You gotta start.
I am, right, let's whittle it down. I'm not willing to give up the arts
No,
No.
to
that's not an option.
to save $8 million. They're worth that much to me.
I think we gotta, why would we let the town spend $13.7 million and do option B? So why don't we take that one out, which is Westland School connected,
Yep.
Yep.
right?
I agree.
So let's rule that one out.
So we could pretty much
Well,
say
when it's
anything
connected, that's
is gone.
connected to, just to center, right?
No.
No.
You had some
That was
some pods at Westland?
Center is always connected because that is the
Right.
school that can have connected.
Oh, it's connected to
So
the
option,
Westlands.
option B, Center School
I
has
see.
4 connected just to
Right.
Center.
Because they're
And then-
already up to code.
Correct. And then the Westlands connected is the next one down, and then Westlands disconnected is the third one down.
We could take disconnecteds off.
So we could take the
could-
connected
you
off,
could
but
take
keep
the-
the other two,
Correct.
Sorry,
So,
connected.
again, as a reminder.
which is essentially the same cost as D2.
In all of option B, right, the home for community ed is unknown
Right.
For D.
For B.
for B.
For B.
For B.
He is the only one that considers
Option B
community
with
ed.
Westlands. We have a lot of Bs and As and.
So,
But, right, in all 3B options, right, the destination for community ed is unknown. And it was part of the genesis of the option D.
There's a cost for that.
An
every-
unknown cost for that. And
Yeah,
do we have any realistic proposals?
We don't. I mean, that wasn't one that we
Then-
vetted
then
further.
Let's gotta go too.
And
Then
that-
let's get rid of
Right,
it.
those populations are the youngest and most vulnerable. Do we really want to be dealing with pods there?
Well, not CHIPS, but community ed.
Community
Community
ed.
ed does, we're talking about KCC. I mean, at night,
Right.
we can take them back to the high school.
So
Community ed.
remember that with full-day kindergarten, KCC may not be necessary
True.
anymore.
Very good point.
which is
There may
why
still
we
be
got
some-
to the reduced in
Right.
option D2. We
Right.
reduced the number of
10 instead of
modulars
12.
for CHIPS. So it's just moving that CHIPS program out to the modulars and giving them 4 or 5 modulars.
So are we agreeing
So that
that
leaves
D
us
is
with
gone?
A, C, and D2, right?
Yeah.
A, C, and D2, that's correct.
C, D2, yeah.
Now, to Michael's point, that's if community ed doesn't grow,
Yeah, CHIPS,
D2.
yeah, right.
which you're at
think-
5.5 million now, right?
Yes.
Which, why would you,
Is there, just before we do that, do you guys have anything to add? Are we overlooking something?
Covered a lot of ground.
I think the only thing I'd say, and, I mean, this is really our decision, we've just tried to go out and get the work done so that we can put it forth for consideration, but, I look at, like, the rental, and I question, administrative costs for that option versus another, because I think the rental, you're building a whole new school, basically, which means that it's more than teachers and such. You have a whole separate bus route. So I haven't heard any comparative analysis of administrative costs, which I think when the time comes to go to the voters, it's gonna come up.
It has to come
the
up,
only
right?
way, Pat, you're absolutely right, the only way C works is if something falls on our lap where there is a building that the owner says, I'm not gonna charge you market, which is $750 triple net, it's the school, it's Goodwill, I'm gonna charge you half price. Then C becomes a real option because you just cut that expense maybe by,
Right.
30% or more. So, to John's point, and to my, it doesn't hurt you to leave it on right now as
Right.
one of the ones, because that'll play itself out very quickly.
Right.
So, that's how I feel about that.
One more thing about disconnected A that I like too is if the building plan doesn't happen in a few years, it also adds additional space to each school, which is not ideal. I don't like the idea of using modular as permanent space, but it does add to each school pretty fairly. So
It's,
And
again,
I
it's
wasn't
not
knocking
permanent
that
space.
one.
It's not permanent.
It's
You know, it was
20-year
just-
space. I really do think it's
Comparative
important to start,
analysis
that we
is
use
gonna have to
numbers
be done at some
when we
point.
talk about these
it's
things.
right. It's 20-year space, right?
But if you take
Yeah,
out
I
C,
Yeah.
now you're only down to two, D2 and A disconnect.
Oh, no, I wasn't suggesting taking out C. I was just saying that each option is going to have different administrative costs, was my point.
Right.
And that needs to be vetted at some point.
That's
you
fair,
would
but
think.
I'll say.
So I
it.
wasn't suggesting
Yeah, but I'll say
taking
it then.
anything.
I'll say it. If we can't find something by the end of the week or very quickly, then I say C is out. Because why would you spend 6 to 8 million when you can go, disconnect to keep all the people there, and
Right.
those even aren't all the expenses, 6 to 8 million. You have busing, you have the whole, infrastructure that has to be built, so I'll come right out and say it. If you can't get a great deal on C, C's out.
Right. So what do we have left? We have A disconnect.
D2, A, disconnect, C.
Just from my perspective, if you're looking at these options, obviously, if a rental opportunity came along, great. I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt to keep that in play. The issue that D2 presents, and I think this is what the committee needs to weigh, is you're talking in comparison to A disconnected, a very similar number of modulars. Comparable money. I know it's a couple $1 million more in capital costs, but when you look at the operational cost, you're going to be able to have the 2 or 3 classrooms, if they're located at the school level, just assumed into the operational plant of those schools. So you're not hiring a different principal, administrator, things like that. Your bus routes are actually going to those schools already, so you're not adding
Right.
transportation costs to the schools. If anything, you're actually going to see a decrease because you're not doing the midday runs anymore. You also then don't have to deal with the choice issue, because under D, you have half the kids going to the neighborhood schools, and the other half of the kids are going to the central location. So you have that issue of the haves and have-nots, and you actually have increased transportation costs, because right now, we don't have routes that go in the morning and the afternoon to comment, right? So technically, half of your district, so you're running double routes. You're running routes already to your neighborhoods for your school kids who are in the program, and you're going to run a second set of bus routes to the neighborhood from ComEd. So there are significant operational costs that I think should be vetted under D2 if that's in consideration, because when you're looking at this over a 6 or 8 year period, that cost is, you're going to be paying more than $2 million just to pull that off. The other consideration for A1 disconnected, if you look in that route, as part of the master planning discussions to date that we've been talking about, we've identified this long-term issue of space capacity needs at the elementary school level. So even after a larger building project went forward, we know that there are space issues for special ed programming, for English language learner programming, just for general flux and enrollments in the schools at the elementary school level. Having an extra 3 classrooms at the elementary levels in the long term, to Mike's point, going up to 20 years, buys you that flexibility, and it actually blends into that larger master plan discussion. So I think that, on an operational standpoint, should come into play, because, it's $2 million more, but over 20 years, and if you're mitigating your operational costs, and there's efficiencies, and everyone's in their neighborhood, and you have long-term benefit of actually having extra space capacity, I think there could be a compelling argument for A1 disconnected over D2.
I agree with him.
Can I just say one thing to answer your question simply is, where you're heading is right, and the point of it now is we need to set them free because, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago here, there could be a location or two in a option A disconnect that aren't going to be exactly where they go. There could have been flow problems around the building, so that number can jump up, that number can jump down, and I think you want to know that number.
Yes.
Officially, so that you have your final cost.
Can I make a motion? Sure. We're at that point. I make a motion that we put forth 2 options, option A, disconnect, and option C, leased, and with option C, have a decision, have a window within a period of time, the next week or so, or,
We still have 2 weeks till the next meeting.
2 weeks to the next meeting, but I make a recommendation that we whittle this down to 2 options. Option A, disconnect, option C, lease, with option C being a decision within 2 weeks or the next school committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Listen, any further discussion?
We've beaten this one.
Yes.
That poor horse.
Yeah, but it's been productive.
Yeah.
I'd also like to say
This
that,
horse has,
you know,
this
I
horse
just-
is gonna take a couple more beatings before it's all over.
It's okay.
those of us that have gone through the many hours, you know, the 4-hour sessions and so forth, I honestly feel none of it was a waste of time, because what's happened is, well, a good example was when Paul came in last week and with that idea, let's build from, you know, take care of kindergarten, build everything up. Well, I hadn't heard anybody say that. And it's turned out that, you know, it didn't work, but it was worth hearing because I hadn't heard it before. And I think that there were a lot of turning points like that. So you know, it's been frustrating, but I don't think we've wasted all that much time.
Nope.
I think it's been a very good discussion. I'd just like to hear from you folks. Is that okay? That motion put you in a good direction?
Thrilled with that motion.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay.
And just one more thing, Chairman Thomas. I think for a level of transparency, if anybody is watching our school committee meetings or been to the visioning sessions, they realize that not only Dor and Whittier, but even Paul Cohen and the town and this entire school committee exhausted every avenue. We looked at every stone, right down to the 12th hour, of looking at an option that is just not an option, I should say, but, you know, we've done our job. Everybody, I think, should be proud of what they've done.
And I think the comments from the superintendent have been
Critical.
exceptionally helpful, too.
Game changers.
It's only the people who don't watch the meetings that have problems with transparency.
And they don't like us anyways, Mike.
I'll root them out of order, don't worry about it. All right,
Made a motion.
time to vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any negative votes or abstentions? Hearing none, unanimous, let's celebrate.
Good job.
We can go home now, Ken.
We got much more to go.
Table everything to the next meeting.
No, I know.
There's a big pile of paper in front of me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, your
Thanks,
patience
guys.
is
Great job.
fantastic.
Great job. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you, guys.
And your patience.
It's tough, but I think we did good work. The discussion across the room.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
We
Thank you, Brian.
are. We're really a long way away. This is a long shot. Like, I realize this is tough. This is not. But we got to have a plan. You can't.
You have to block the thing where
I'm
it
sorry.
shows over
I
there.
feel like we really
Wow.
dug into this. I got it.
Just want to make sure.
I know when the red light's on.
Right. Just want to make sure.
A 45 caliber bullet at 22 words.
All right, enough with this, guys.
Okay,
we all
let's
set?
move on, yeah.
Okay. So if we move on to the next item on the agenda this evening, it's a discussion, actually. We received some information from the planning board regarding the rezoning effort in the 129 area, and they were looking for school committee comment or concerns if there were any. We're now part of the list of questions or concerns that'll go out when there are different properties that come forward for review. And the board was looking for what concerns, if any, would be if new development in the area included multifamily housing. So they were looking for, in general terms, committee concerns regarding that, as well as if the committee had a position one way or the other on the 129 rezoning, just so that the committee would be officially on the record, either support or against the plan. So I bring that forward for discussion. And then whatever the ultimate resolution is, I'll reply to Evan and let him know, so that he can present that at the planning board meeting.
Well, I'll begin by saying that, as we just saw, it's the details that make a difference. And so I think for us to issue a blanket approval or condemnation of a vague plan like this is pointless. I mean, personally, I don't see it as the job of the school committee to approve or disapprove zoning or economic activity. It's our job to educate the kids. If what we're being told is that this zoning might bring more students to town, I would say we are committed to educating those students to the level of excellence that Chelmsford has come to expect. We're not going to cut services just to accommodate them, and that should be taken into account by the other boards and committees who are responsible for approving things like this. And that, as we saw in the packet about a month ago, provided by Mr. Belansky, you can do an economic cost-benefit analysis of a development. And again, I don't think that's for us to do. I think that's for the planning board to do when they review a project. I think it's for the Board of Selectmen to do if something comes in front of them. Our concern, I think, is rightly to educate the children that come to town.
I agree with Mike. I'm not going to make a comment on whatever they're planning because I'm not privy to all the meetings. I haven't read the notes. I don't attend the meetings. I do have an interest as a resident of the town, but as a committee member, if they build residential and there are students, we will figure out how to educate them and fund that. And we'll go to the town if it's a big burden. But other than that, I don't have any actual comment on their plan. I don't like to beat up other committees.
I think this, I have been a part of this, and I was lucky enough to be asked to comment on it several times, make a couple of presentations. Everything what Michael just said, I agree with 100% in regards to, if they do residential, which they will do residential.
They will.
And we will be committed to educating the kids. This really is a good idea. This is a good plan. All I'd like to do is to see this board continue to embrace, new ideas like this. And I also like to challenge to some extent, respectfully speaking, the zoning board to get a little bit more, to use my friend's term, bolder in this package, in this rezoning. This will be a good thing for our kids because this will generate huge dollars that will go back into the town, which indirectly will end up in the school department, or some portion of it, I should say. So I'm all in favor of this. I want it to be a little bolder. This is a good thing for us, but in the end, whatever they put over there for housing, we're committed to educating those kids. So I agree with you 100%, Michael.
The only thing I had indicated in the memo is, again, I don't, from the administration standpoint, really have a perspective on the housing or the rezoning. The only thing I've asked and I've received since coming on board is just notice about the different developments that are coming up in line. And if they just provide us the timely notice, we can then plan and we can put the projections into our enrollment schemes and at least know what's going on. In a situation like the 129 area, say at the elementary school level, you potentially could have kids based on the zone going to Center or going to South Row. We obviously have more capacity at South Row than we do at Center. And if we had a few years' notice about a planned development coming forward, we could figure out which school might make more sense, or if we had to even rezone a particular development, we could.
I think two things there. One, I agree with you that the more notice we get, the better off we will be in terms of being able to accommodate the students. But let me ask, do we really have excess space or extra space at South Row?
Not excess space. Our class sizes are a little bit less than Center.
And the classrooms are smaller.
No, I know, but I'm just looking at the number of students per classroom. I'm just saying if it was a new development and we had some flexibility in figuring out, this isn't going to happen immediately, but which school it would make more sense for the kids to potentially enroll in, it just gives us some flexibility.
No, I agree.
So it's the timely notice that's the most important aspect to me.
Communication is key.
Yeah.
So I'll send a letter to that effect.
Yeah, would you like me to have Debbie draft it and you can sign it, or would you like to? It's totally up to you.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Just something you don't have to worry about.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is, there's been a lot of inquiry lately and actually some newspaper articles regarding question 2, which is coming up in the fall, regarding lifting the cap on charter schools. I had spoken with the chair last week about putting this on the agenda for a discussion and to see if the school committee in Chelmsford wanted to go on record either in support or against this particular proposed legislation. There was an email that came out from the Mass Association of School Committees last week that I attached to the packet. with some draft language that had been executed in a couple of communities, along with a list of all the communities to date that have actually taken action opposing the expansion of charter schools. So that list is attached as well. The MASC does not have any specific language that they're recommending communities take. Basically, they're indicating that just a motion in opposition or not in favor of lifting the charter cap is sufficient, and that can then be communicated to MASC, and they would put us on the list as well for tracking purposes. So I just bring that forward for discussion.
I have a question about charter schools. And I've heard this, and I want clarification, so I understand it if people ask. When you try to go to a charter school as a child, you're entered into a lottery. Do they have to select every child that got through the lottery, or do they get to pick out of that pool?
The way it's supposed to work is if they identify that there are 50 spots available in first grade at a particular school, they have an open enrollment period, and if they receive 70 applicants for those 50 spots, they're actually supposed to do a like a lottery poll, random lottery of the 70 students to select the 50. Most charter schools do that in a public forum, so the parents can come and they announce when the lottery is going to happen, and they're supposed to then enroll the first 50 that get pulled from the lottery.
Okay. Clarifies. And just to go on the record, my position, and we don't have to argue about this, but I do not support charter schools. So lifting the cap in this particular, I'm not going to vote yes for 2 personally.
For a motion?
Yeah. Do we want to do a motion?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I don't.
I'll do it. Do you want me?
Please.
Yeah. Make a motion that the Chelmsford School Committee oppose raising the cap on charter schools.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
This is a little tough, mostly because I don't have a really strong opinion. I think the local charter school has done an excellent job.
Yes, no doubt.
And I'm loath to suggest that they're not serving the kids well. That said, I think there are significant and very real concerns about the way some charter schools do business. I haven't made up my mind personally which way I will vote on this referendum. So, if it's the general will of the committee to oppose lifting the cap, I could go with it, I guess. I'll have to think about it a little bit more while you guys talk.
I just always go back to the original purpose. They were supposed to be testing grounds for new ideas, new ways to, do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, and
Somehow
I think
we got lost in that. And they
so.
became
I
a
think
business
some of them
venture.
do that, not all of them. And Al, you've probably got your own view of it based on having done that kind of work before. But I see it a little bit, and when you talk to especially here, the kids who go to Innovation Academy, the parents I talk to, the kids I talk to, really enjoy the atmosphere. It's not a traditional classroom, and I've heard other parents and kids say, you know what, I checked it out, it wasn't for me.
Right.
But for the kids that it works for, it is fantastic.
I'm glad we have a good option.
Right,
for
I'm glad the
students
kids
in our
have that.
community. I don't want to dilute that, and I want to hold anything that comes forward to that standard. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I mean, so as a superintendent, I mean, how much, because I know that charter schools tend to draw from public funds in some ways. What are the vehicles that revenue comes out of a public school and goes towards a charter? Is it like busing, or like how do we support them?
Well, I mean, they receive Chapter 78 the same way the school district would. I mean, not the exact same way.
Not exactly the same way,
But that's how they receive their revenue from the state. Basically, it comes through as an assessment to the town on the cherry sheet. There's and again, the Chapter 70 formula is extensive. The reimbursement and the whole formula for charter schools is extensive. But in essence, the district. The first year a district loses a student to a charter school, there's a particular reimbursement level that you get for that through the assessment, and then it's like a step down type system, so that eventually the money travels with the child to the to the charter school. That was the intention.
And theoretically, the cost travels with the child as well, but you do get into.
Theoretically.
It goes back to the stickiness, right? If you drop one kid out of a class, you still have to pay the teacher. You don't get to pay the teacher 5% less.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So, I mean, your costs don't really reduce
Yeah, I think.
exactly the same way that kids go.
Right. The rub for a lot of public school districts is that you never see, in a school district, enough students actually elect to go to the charter school to allow for, say, a school closure, grade level, reconfiguration or shrinking, so that you would actually see the operational costs go down at the same rate that you're losing the revenue coming in.
Right.
There's also, again, from my perspective, there's other funding inequities, and the charter schools aren't held to the same regulations that the public school districts are in certain areas. One funding inequity is that, again, that our charter school is in Tingsboro, so it doesn't particularly come into play with us. But if the charter school were operated in Chelmsford, the Chelmsford Public Schools would be responsible for providing the transportation for the charter school students
And we
to
were
their
for-
school.
for
So if we were to
several
lift-
years, yeah.
And we
So if we were
did.
to lift the cap, theoretically, in a charter school, so great, we have now space to open a new one, we're gonna open it in Chelmsford, we would have to provide transportation.
The district would have to provide transportation, correct,
Comes out of the school budget, not the town.
out of our budget.
Wow.
So, and again, there are different little nuances within the formula like that, again, just, they hamper they kind of, anti the
You're
the
running
public
a,
school
you're
district.
running a separate system that isn't funded separately. That's one of that.
And you have
I
no
think is-
accountability over it.
Right. Those are the two biggest knocks on the charter school system to me, right? The one being that there is no public oversight. The directors are chosen by the other
Of an elected
directors,
board.
basically.
But there's no elected board.
Right. There's no public oversight, even though they're spending public dollars. But again, my concern about that is not borne out when you look at the performance of the local school. So I am torn.
So I think, though, all we're doing, this vote is representative of just lifting the cap, raising the cap so they can build more. So it's not really gonna affect the local charter schools.
No.
That's actually, what this is, Michael, is it's indicates the number of school districts across the state have been passing resolutions against raising the cap on charter schools.
Right.
Right.
So, so this is
So we're voting to support or not support this resolution.
basically going on
Well-
record as opposition
To question.
to
Right.
question 2.
Yes.
Right.
So,
But question 2 is saying that they want to raise the cap so they can build more charter schools.
Right.
Right, and I don't support that. I think the charter schools we have are fine, and there are options, and they have lotteries, and kids get to go there, and if the program's good, it's good. I mean, some aren't, but I don't want to lift the cap and add more.
I gotta be honest, charter schools, I think charter schools do a lot of good work. I've seen them work. I've seen the impact they make. I realize what they do in some instances to bedroom communities like Chelmsford. But I'll tell you what, there's something to be said about charter schools, and there's something to be, it's a part of a larger discussion of the benefits. And I don't know if I can support at this point, at being asked right now today, this right now. I think it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit of a larger discussion. I've seen the impact that charter schools have and the argument could be made, and I've heard people make the argument, well, they belong in just urban cities, and, I don't agree with that. I agree that they belong where they can do the best impact for kids, working alongside public schools. I just think they have to kind of work out the math a little bit more, and maybe it has to be restructured a little bit more, but
I think if you use public
and this is
money-
against every, you should be saying, and I apologize for interrupting you, John.
Sure.
It's, people should be saying, well, you're on the school committee, you should be against charter schools. I don't feel that way.
They're still public schools. I mean, I feel the same way about the Voc, right? I mean, we're not in competition with the Voc. Those are our kids. And
Right.
As somebody once said, if either you're in favor of education or you're not, you don't get to pick and choose that some education is good and some is bad. You can talk about some is effective and some is less effective, but
But I think we're fortunate that we have a really good charter school in our area. I don't want to open the gates to encourage many charter schools when there's no oversight mechanism in place. And that's my problem.
I did not
I don't
know
if
that.
that's what it's saying, right? Is that is saying that the districts support not lifting the cap on charter schools. It doesn't say, the bill doesn't say, okay, if you vote no against charter schools, we're not opening anymore in Chelmsford. This is like across.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I think this is a bigger, does that make sense, Bob?
It
It's a
absolutely
bigger
makes sense.
question.
I know what you're saying, but
And
I want to make sure that, now the charter schools are there, and we've seen failures in that area. I don't want kids to be lured out of their home schools into a charter school that's failed. I want to see a charter school system that guarantees success.
And that's maybe an argument for voting against lifting the cap. There was an attempt last year in the legislature to kind of address both sides of the issue. They were going to tie a cap raise to some reforms that could be helpful. That's not a bad idea, I think. But yeah, I mean, there is some oversight, right? They still have to be approved. They still get reviewed. They still report MCAS scores. Again, sometimes some of them like to churn and they basically whitewash their MCAS scores. There are some unsavory
Churning bothers
schools.
me a lot.
Yeah.
This is not a vote against charter schools for me. It's just a vote against lifting the cap, and I don't think we need to lift the cap. That's my
This is for the
opinion.
entire state, Michael. I mean, not John.
Well, I'm just in Chelmsford, right, but I would not want another charter school here right now. I think we need to, but I'm not against charter schools. I mean, if we happen to have a good one, and it's not my area of expertise, so I'm kind of just, this discussion is kind of how I'm going to make my decision. So I don't think lifting the cap is appropriate.
But that's not, just one more time, I apologize, John. This is saying that we're gonna send our blessing in that we don't think the cap should be lifting
Right.
in Massachusetts,
Right.
not in Chelmsford.
Got it.
So,
That's what I'm putting my weight behind, so.
so you don't want any more charter schools, you don't want the cap in the entire state lifted?
I don't.
Okay,
I think
that's
we
fair.
should.
That's a fair answer.
I'd just like to add a couple of things. First of all, I want
Let
to
me,
go back
actually, I'd like
to
to.
Barbara's point, because that's always been important to me. We were supposed to get some benefit in terms of information back. Well, what have we learned? That a longer day helps, no kidding. That smaller classes are good, no kidding. That high expectations are good, no kidding. That parent support's important, no kidding. And yeah, those are all the things. So what have we learned? And they have project. They have different kinds. They have project-based ones. Our kids are doing projects all over the place. So I'm not sure that in terms of return in that sense, that we've gotten much. Another thing that bothers me in the advertisement that's gone out, they've been talking about failing public schools. I'm sorry. There are failing public schools. But just as we wouldn't want to lump all of the charter schools together as being good, bad, or anything else, that really bothered me that was a major part of their publicity. Another thing that I'm really concerned about is that in our type of public school, the kids have equal access. If they need AP, they can get it. If they need special education, they can get it. With a charter school, if you're not in the 50 kids, there's nothing's going to change for those kids. And I understand, because I've seen enough of the urban, successes and so forth. And I think that's great. But it just bothers me, because we're working hard to provide opportunity across the board, and it's not the same to draw a parallel with charter school and voc schools, because that's just another extension of the opportunity that we offer in a public sense. And for the most part, you can get to go there. I mean, some of the programs I know, like the voc and Lowell, have been really competitive, and people haven't been able to get in, but that's a different story. So I think that under my philosophy, and I'm troubled, in much the same way Sal is. I'd like to see all those kids get helped in whatever way they can. But you know, our system is set up so that if you have a need, there's a pretty good chance you're gonna get a shot of it being addressed on an equal basis, okay? So, another thing that I talked to Michael earlier today that bothers me is that in the list that was in the paper yesterday because there was news, I forget where it was about, but the schools that they were looking at were so-and-so prep charter school, so-and-so collegiate charter school.
Marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Must be nice to have an advertising budget.
No, but that's the thing.
We should put that on our high school, Chelmsford
should be an
Collegiate High
academy.
School.
But that's the thing is.
But it's more than that, you know, and I think that's another thing that bothers, that's part of the high expectations. I understand, but they're selling a higher level of education. They're not saying, send us all of your kids that are immigrants and so forth. You know, we'll take some of them and we'll give them all the extra stuff, and so those 50 kids or whatever, 100 or whatever, and it's great that those kids are taken care of, and we've seen it.
Right.
No
I
question.
oppose the idea that you can apply a business model to education.
Well,
I know
anyway.
people want us to, and I know it's tempting to say, why don't we run our schools like a business? Because you can't, because it's education.
Oh, that's hard.
Enron?
Look, I actually asked, because I got communication, Jay to put this on. If you don't want to vote, we don't have to vote.
I want to vote.
We have a motion, right?
We have a motion on the
Yeah,
table.
I know, but we could withdraw it. I mean,
Right.
you know, if
I
there's
don't know
enough.
if we have to have consensus. If
We don't have to.
No, I
John
don't.
made a motion, I'm happy to,
All right.
You're on record with your position. It's not like.
yeah, I'll second the motion.
No, it's already been
No, you
seconded.
made
It's already been seconded?
We're just ready for a vote.
So we're ready, yeah, I think we've done enough. Anybody want to add anything else? I think we've covered it. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Maybe we should do a roll call vote, because I might get, I'll start, I'll say aye.
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 I'm gonna abstain,
Okay.
only on the grounds.
I'm going to
that
say no.
Okay.
All right.
It's a great vote. I love that vote.
I like that vote.
And there are
We
solid
covered all the
reasons for
angles.
all of
Right,
it.
we got it all.
I love that vote.
I understand your abstention
Who's
too.
better than Al?
No one.
The other.
I still don't know how I'm gonna
He's the
vote.
best.
This go around.
All right,
When it was-
Sal,
moving right
I said
along.
no.
Barbara,
Aye,
Yes.
aye,
She's still getting it.
Abstain.
and abstain.
Yeah, I get
still getting
it.
The
Yeah.
abstention in the sea of other answers.
So 3-1-1.
Yeah.
A lot less words.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
We can have breakfast together.
Now,
I got a better off.
let me offer this to you, because the next document, or the next report we had was my year in review for last year.
You're hired. I already read
No,
it.
I think,
You're hired.
No, last week I hit my 1-year anniversary, and so, thank you. So one of the things that I did is just go through some notes, kind of recap the past year. I think it's helpful for the school committee, it's helpful for the administrative staff, it'll be helpful for even the town when we put together the fall town meeting book. So these are some of the highlights, and I also think at this point for the next meeting, you'll have to start working on my evaluation, so we'll have an evaluation subcommittee, but this is a good document to just kind of help you with the highlights. Would you like me to take 2 or 3 minutes and walk you through it?
Sure.
Would you not like me to?
We were here for most of it.
can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I would like, sometimes as these meetings go on, people kind of fade out. I think this is a pretty big deal what Dr. Lang's talking about. So don't you think we should do it when a lot of people are watching it and a lot of people realize the benefits of what Dr. Lang has done?
We could do it as part of the evaluation if you wanna do it.
Yeah.
Then it's all connected.
Yeah,
use
if
it
you
to
want, we
set
could
up
move
the
this to the
meeting.
September 5th meeting, and
That's great.
I could do it then. I think it's important for the community to hear,
Yeah.
but I have no problem
Yeah, I think at this time.
pushing
we-
this to the,
There's
To the
been a lot of great things that need to be told.
Yeah.
okay, so we'll push that to the 5th.
You're doing okay, I guess.
Thank you. And I'm still here. So, next item on the agenda this evening is the budget transfer request. So you do have a memo in front of you for myself, as well as the principal of the Parker Middle School. When we approved the budget, one of the setups for one of the student assistant programs at the schools. The previous model that was implemented last year called for one teacher and 4 paraprofessionals to basically service 1 paraprofessional per each grade level. They had looked at this model last year. There were pros and cons to it. They have some staff switching in the program this year, and they would like to go to a model that I believe McCarthy was implementing, where instead of, the difficulty they're having is 1 special education teacher being really proficient and able to service 4 grade levels of students. So they would like to change the model and hire 2 special education teachers, 1 to do 5-6, the other to do 7-8, and basically 2 paraprofessionals, so 1 will assist each person. There are 2 paraprofessionals that were previously assigned to the program. 1 is actually moving into the NEC program at the Parker this year, and the other, I honestly would have to read the report again to figure out where they were going, but it's a vacancy. So there are no actual bodies in play. They're requesting to be able to basically convert the 2 open paraprofessional positions into a teaching position. And within the special education budget, the way we set that up, bless you, that was approved.
Thank you.
Teachers and paraprofessionals are on 2 different line, 2 different pages of the budget. They're all salaries. But teachers are included on DESI Function Code 2310 when the paras are on 2330. So we're requesting approval, and there is the rationale behind it, to basically be able to convert the 2 paras to 1 teacher, change up the model for the year. I did have a discussion with Amy Reese, the new special education administrator. She had talked to Jeff at the Parker as well as Patty, the ETC, I'm sorry, I call him ETC, the special education chair, and they were in agreement at kind of revamping the model for the year. Should be cost neutral, but I do bring that forward as a recommendation because it does require your approval as it ties out to 2 different pages of the budget.
I'm good with it.
I'm good.
You need a vote?
Yes, we need a vote because it is a money transfer, so it has to be a roll call vote as well.
So, Dr. Lane, could you please help us?
Yes, if we had a motion to approve the transfer of $45,000 from the special education special education paraprofessional account under Function Code 2330 to the special education teacher account, Function Code 2310. Sharon, I'll give this to you later.
Okay, I have
And
Good luck, Sal.
to effectuate that change.
Effectuate. I like it.
I make a motion that we transfer 45,000 from the special para 2330 account to the special teachers 2310 account.
Fine.
Good enough?
Yeah.
Second.
Ah,
Second.
Motion
Good.
made, seconded.
knock that right in.
Any questions or discussion?
None.
Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Roll call.
Any negative vote or,
Well, as long as there's no negative vote.
Aye.
was
I'll
that
vote for
unanimous?
That was unanimous.
Okay, so we did do the call-in event attendant already, so we'll skip that item. Next one was a permission to post for an ELL facilitator, and some rationale from Linda accompanying that. Basically, it's a request to utilize some of the Title 2A grant money, $4,000, to create a stipend for an existing teacher within the district to help out Lori McDermott, our coordinator for ELL, teaching, reading, Title I, I think there's one other offshoot, to be able to really do some of the support work with our ELL students and their families. Some of the professional development days that we actually have where the coordinator would be involved to help them lead some of the training. So we're recommending the committee approve of this $4,000 stipend so that we can advertise and try to have a teacher come on board at the start of the school year to give Lori and Linda a hand.
So this is not someone who's already on staff who would step forward?
No, this will be a teacher, we're assuming, in the school system that will receive a stipend for doing this work out of after school and out of school hours.
Right. That'll be grant funded, so no
Grant
impact
funded.
to the operating budget.
Awesome.
Great.
Correct.
Yeah.
Love it.
Correct.
So,
And our ELL population has increased pretty dramatically over the years. So, Mr. Lapoli, this could be a recommendation to approve a $4,000 stipend to fund an ELL facilitator position through the Title IIA grant.
thank you very much, sir. I make a motion that we fund, that we allow the $4,000 stipend that will be paid to service a new ELL Facilitators.
Facilitators, yep, through the Title II-A grant.
Through the Title II-A grant.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion, questions?
Second fiddle.
Great job.
Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any negative or abstention? None, unanimous.
Thank you. Moving on, we approved the ITC service manager position earlier,
Yep.
so we'll switch to the last agenda item of the evening. And this is a request coming before you to basically convert a 10-month position to a 12-month position within the community education program over at the Westland School. There is some background provided by Sherry Parker, the Director of ComEd. They, in essence, had two positions within the program. One was a child care coordinator position that was vacated. It was a 12-month position. There was an individual in a different capacity at the school that was in a 10-month job. They basically, instead of posting for another 12-month person, would like to find some economy and actually streamline some of the duties and extend the 10-month person who worked just school year to now work year-round into a 12-month role, which basically her salary will just be calculated based on a 12-month schedule instead of a 10-month schedule, and then not backfill and hire the second person. So there is a long, lengthy rationale, but basically the second paragraph of the memo would be the motion, if the committee approved, to approve the request to increase the 10-month Lions Pride supervisor to a 12-month position and retitle the new 12-month position Community Ed Child Care Program Supervisor. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Essentially, we're going to be saving money with this move.
It's all within community education, though. It's all within the ComEd revolving fund. But yes, you are saving money. You're going from 2.0 FTEs, down to 1 point. No, I'm sorry. You're going
It'd be
from
like
1.8
Yeah,
to
2 to 1. Right.
1. So technically, there's a 0.8, and they're indicating that there'll be some operational efficiencies as well, in addition to the financial savings. But it is all within the ComEd program.
So
You're not going
I have a difficult question for you to answer. How are we going to spend that money? Right?
That's for a whole other
This is the
night.
revolving fund that
Right.
we need to do something with. So yeah, I'm glad to bank it.
Right.
And I don't think you'll ever hear me ask it again.
No, at one of the meetings in September, we'll actually be bringing forward the grant and revolving fund budgets for the year, so we can have that
Okay.
discussion. It's funny, but it's a good thing. Even though we're trying to spend down that fund, it's just not going down. So we'll talk about that in September. We'll have the budget that we can share with you at that time. But this is actually a cost savings. There's no cost
Right.
increase, and it is all within the fund.
So, I'd like to make a motion, sir. I make a motion that the school committee approve this request to increase the 10-month Lions Pride supervisor to a 12-month position and retitle the new 12-month position as Community Education Child Care Program Supervisor.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Just one point. Can we make these two formats the same?
I'm sorry, which one?
The community ed format for the job description is not the same as the district one, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can do that. I think they're using an old format.
Anything else? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any negative vote or abstention? None, unanimous.
This is coming up in review.
Any liaison reports?
I do want to say, I don't know if I've talked about it, but I've gone out and seen some of the schools, and Barbara has too, and I think you've gone and seen one. And I got to say, the work has been phenomenal. I know they're a little behind, and I saw the Lowell Sun report, which was really good, really thorough, but they're killing it. Those floors look great. Teachers have been surprised. And I think most importantly, the principals that I've talked to have said that the response from Mr. Gurley has been just phenomenal, that they have no problems getting things done. There's always communication now as opposed to when error mark was in. So that's all I got, but I just want to bring it up.
Congratulations.
No, thank you. This was something that the school committee pushed and the school committee ultimately approved this hybrid model. I've received several calls from other communities that are interested in taking a look at this. So I do think this will be a model that, will be replicated in other areas. It really, it comes down to, hiring good companies to come in at night and do that work. I think they have a manageable load. I think obviously this first summer, the conditions that they're walking into are going to be far less than, were optimal and will be easier in the future. And the tack that really all three companies are taking is, some of them are somewhat taking a hit this first summer, getting things up to speed, because they're looking at this as being a long-term relationship. They don't want this to be a one-and-done type situation, so that they're putting the extra effort in this summer. In particular, you see it in the floors, just because of the amount of time they're spending stripping and prepping and waxing the floors, because they really want those to be the focal point for when staff come back. So I am excited about that. I think the other component that was lacking is really the whole contract administration and oversight piece, because as important it is to have good contractors in, the proof is really going to be in sustaining this model once the school year starts and you start having 5,000-6,000 kids, utilizing the facilities. So that's going to be the important factor. What was missing in the past is that Brian Curley position, that director of facilities. So he's interacting and interfacing with lead custodians who now really take a lot of pride in their buildings because there are staff on a daily basis. He also is that point of contact with not only those individuals, but the three cleaning companies for the nighttime. So I think that was an element that was missing, and I think is going to, again, really just kind of yield some positive returns. So I'm excited about people coming back and seeing the schools, but really the proof will be in sustaining that once the school year gets going, bringing in that third-party evaluation eventually to kind of make sure that we're all being held to the same standards. And I think it's a great model. I appreciate your support and your pushing us to do that. It wouldn't have happened without your commitment.
I just want to say one more thing in reference to that. I had a wonderful conversation with Principal Murray, and if anybody wants to see some exciting new things as far as painting and certainly the floors, also Principal Murray's done some great things with providing filtered water for the kids in the gym, and we're shooting for the science wing next year, but we have it up in the cafeteria and we have it for the teachers. So I want to commend and just reiterate what an unbelievable job Principal Murray's doing, but that's certainly a reflection upon the whole system and certainly our superintendent. So great job. It's working out well.
I know Bill's still in transition, but as soon as you can get those contracts up on the website, that would be great, the vendors.
Yes, sure. Yep.
Anything from prior meetings? I think we had scheduled. We need to still do our goals, no?
We need to report out on how you achieve them. And you did very good last year, but we need to report out on how you achieve them. And then we need to set the goals going forward. But we actually, that Dorothy Presser from the MASC is willing to come back and do that with us.
Okay.
So maybe we could gauge her availability for one of the September meetings
Okay.
and have her come back and do that. And if you want, we can carve out some time to do a write-up on last year's goals and present that at a future meeting.
Yeah, it seems to me in the past, we had tried to get the superintendent evaluation done first. Is that right?
Don't really recollect.
I don't know.
It's a little sketchy
Yeah.
in my brain, but I'm not on that anymore.
Which
Okay.
one?
Are there any other carryover?
I have a couple of
Yeah.
things. The food service sales report from the state.
We still don't have it.
Okay, just
Yep.
to keep it alive, and an email is fine on that. That doesn't need to be a presentation. I also have, from a few meetings ago, what's the situation with the state primary election on September 8th? It's still being held
It's
at
still being held
McCarthy.
on
And
September
are we
8th, yeah.
having access only through the small gym to minimize the disruption?
The plan that was going to go forward for September 8th was the same plan that was in effect for the spring election.
And I have a new request. Could we see a year-end report on the substitute usage?
Yeah.
We've been getting some interim ones, and I noticed that you were finishing that up, I think.
Yep, we can do that. We can do both financial and just take a look at your fill rates by month. The computer actually generates some pretty good
Right.
reports. So yes, we can do that.
A long time ago, we were going to look at fundraising. Do we still want to proceed with that?
I don't want to quit on it.
I mean, things are definitely better.
Yeah, I
They're
think so.
better, but let's not just finish it up just yet.
Yeah.
Barbara and I can have a discussion about it, please.
Yeah. All right. Anything, so nothing else under prior? So I'm writing a letter to Evan Belansky. Who's going to contact the people about the vote on the
The
charter
MASC.
schools?
If you- They can just accept an email. If you want, I'll send them an email tomorrow.
All right.
It might be a job for the secretary, actually.
You want me to
Seriously,
unplug?
no, not the unplugging, but communicating with the MASC.
I'm also
about the-
MASC delegate.
Thank you.
It doesn't matter to me.
So if you can dig a ditch or two.
Well, you were jiggling the plug when you
Yes,
said it.
Yes, I was.
This is a job for the
Multitasking.
secretary.
It must be late, because we didn't. Is there anything else that somebody had a note of that we need to complete after tonight's meeting?
I just want to be clear, who's going to send the communication to the MASC?
It's up to you. I am willing to do it. If I'm the delegate, you just need to tell me who to send it to and what to send and how to word it. But
Yeah, send it to
Might as well
Tracy.
do it. If that's-
Send it to Tracy Novick, and the motion was to oppose lifting the charter cap.
okay,
And give her the
And just
vote.
give her the vote.
Yeah,
There's a majority.
give her the vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
3-1-1.
Big letters. Sal said no.
That's
Everybody
just
else.
3-1-1.
I'm just kidding.
It's okay.
all right, I'll entertain a
No, I'm
motion
good.
to adjourn. I was
Make a
afraid
motion
you
to
would
adjourn.
stop me.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Sal,
Sal, Laura.
second.
Abstain.